So, but you're still paying essentially a car lease, right, to get these drugs.
Yeah.
And probably, you know, not even a few milliliters are costing you $125 a week.
Well, I have great news for you and for our viewers. We're going to speak with Wendy Barnes. She's the GoodRx CEO on this news later on in the show at about 10:10 a.m.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be a good conversation. Let's quickly check on futures here in the pre-market. It's a brand new trading week, and we are about 20 minutes away from the opening bell. There wasn't too much movement when we checked about 10 minutes ago. It's pretty much the same conversation. Right now, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100 down slightly in the pre-market trade. The Russell 2000 peeking into the green here, but not too much action. But we know it's a very hefty week on the earnings front, the geopolitical front, and of course, the...
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, simulcasting on Xspaces, and streaming on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. For the ones that would like to interface during the show, join Xspaces. You can ask for the mic, and you're live on the show. You can give me your opinion about what's going on. The bulk of what we're going to be covering will be the discussions in the White House with Zelensky and the European Union representatives, with the whole ceasefire, peace agreement, potentiality in Ukraine. So that's going to be a big story. And of course, any economic data. I'll give you some of my perspectives on some of the movements that are happening in the market and where some of the entry level positions potentially are and the support levels. So thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it if you share the links and ask your social media to follow me. We're recording this and live streaming on August 18th. I will be replaying this on my other channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all those channels and ask your social media to follow me. I also have 2 X channels and a GETTR channel. You can follow me through those social media outlets. Now, I have great products to offer. A great way to help support the work is through donations and purchasing the products. For the ones that are overseas that would like to support the work, if you can't get the products that I offer on my store, please help by donating. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee on my homepage. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. All these videos I do are for free. I don't put anything behind a paywall. So it's through your patronage, through donations, and purchasing the products that help. For the ones that are domestic audience that would like to help, you can donate. Again, you'll be able to get my products from my store. So take a look at some of the great products that I have. I have structural nanosilver soaps, lemongrass, charcoal tea tree, also in lavender, very popular one, and peppermint. Get a couple bars for your household, and this helps support the work that I do. But not just that, it helps to support your health and wellness. This show is about to inform you about what's going on in the world, how it can affect your finances, how you can benefit from the breaking news, and how to improve your health. So it's a great way to learn. So please help support the work that I do by purchasing the very high quality products that I offer. And these are products that I use. So please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You get a gift if you spend $100 or more. You get a free gift until supplies last. And you're moving towards improving your health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, with that, we're going to go to Bloomberg.
TR and its CEO will buy outstanding shares not held by certain shareholders for about $9 each. You can see the shares trading at $8.88. That's got to be good luck somewhere. Buyout firm Thoma Bravo is also in talks on a take private for Dayforce, a human resources management software provider. Sources telling us here at Bloomberg that...
We're going to go to CNBC.
X and hold this week. Is there market risk to it? Do you feel like something may come out of this that could change the perception of the market? Again, we hit new highs last week. We had a winning week last week.
Well, I think that it's all going to be up to Jerome Powell. He will speak at 10 a.m. on Friday, and the question is, will he be a dove, a hawk, or an owl? An owl just kind of sits there and watches, and I think he's going to be an owl. I think he's going to say the Fed is still data dependent. There's still a couple of very important numbers that'll come out before the meeting on the FOMC meeting on September 16th, 17th, namely the personal consumption expenditure deflator inflation rate will probably be a little bit on the hot side at the end of this month. And then before the meeting, we'll have a CPI number, which also could be on the hot side. And then the big number will be the payroll employment number for August. And I think it's going to be something around 100,000, which I think the market would view as indicative of an improving economy. It was very weak, as you know, in May and June, but then it actually recovered to 73,000. That doesn't seem like much, but it's pretty good compared to what we saw in May and June. Okay. And I think August could be up as well.
All right, so I mean, there's still a lot of data points left, is what you're basically saying. You think Jay Powell's going to be an owl. So with that in mind, your pick for us today is the SPY, and I thought this was pretty interesting. It's obviously very dominated by some of those Mag 7 names. Why is this a great time to invest in the S&P 500?
Well, there's the Magnificent 7 in the S&P 500, and then there's the S&P 493. And maybe it's time for some of them to be a little bit more magnificent. I think the market is broadening out, and if that's the case, I think it's broadening out to the 493. It may also be broadening out to the SMID caps, the S&P 400 and 600. But look, with regards to the stock market, I tend to be in the same camp as people like Warren Buffett and Professor Siegel. I think you hold them for the long run. You want to make sure that you get the dividends and reinvest the dividends. And I've got the S&P 500 getting to 10,000 by the end of the decade, which I think we'll look back and say that it was the roaring 2020s, kind of similar to the roaring 1920s.
So Ed, let's get to this. Let's get to your word of the day, because it's kind of related to this thesis. And I also want to ask, then, why are you saying the SPY? Why not the equal weight? If you look over the last week, the equal weight's actually outperforming the market cap weighted index. So if you think the market is broadening out, why not invest there?
I think on a short-term basis, that makes a lot of sense, Frank. And I think that on a longer-term basis, I still want to be in the SPY with the market cap weights.
But isn't that like indirectly a bet on mega cap tech, and the fact that mega cap tech's not only going to see price appreciation when it comes to the stocks, but also drive the earnings growth?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, as I said, in the roaring 2020s. I think that technology is boosting productivity. We're seeing that happening with AI, but lots of other technologies are also boosting productivity. And so I think technology, communication services continue to lead the way. Look, when all is said and done, it may very well be we'll look back and say, most companies are technology companies in the sense that they're using technology to increase productivity.
Before we let you go, very quick, your take on the healthcare balance that we saw month to date. Healthcare actually the best performing sector, driven in large part by UNH and big investors like Appaloosa and Michael Burry buy.
I think there's still an issue with the government being in the face of the healthcare system. Still a lot of pressure on them to lower prices, to increase their productivity, which is a good thing in the long run, but it's expensive in the short run.
Today, Bitcoin continues its
It means the world that I'm able to continue building a life for the kids that Jared and I both envisioned.
Wave goodbye to summer and hello to savings up to 30% during Rainmore Flanagan's Labor Day sale. Exclusive in-store savings combine select matches.
Joining us now, Jeremy Siegel, Chief Economist at Wisdom Tree and Professor Emeritus of Finance at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. Good to see you, Jeremy. We've had guys like Kevin Warsh, well, mention tariff inflation. He'll say tariffs aren't what causes inflation. Never has been, never will be. What inflation is caused by an out of control money supply or too much stimulus in a supply constrained world. And in your view and what you're saying here, they're taxes, tariffs. Taxes are consumption tax actually can cause growth to slow, which just adds to the concerns about the other side of the mandate, and that is a full labor force.
Yeah, you said it very well, Joe. I mean, it's a tax, and I know of no good economic model that says, you know, when a government imposes a tax, they should tighten monetary policy. I mean, whether the flow through of inflation from tariffs is 20%, 40, 60, or 80 is really beside the point. I mean, I do think there's going to be a point, maybe a 1.5 bump in the CPI. It's going to be a one-time, but that doesn't mean the Fed should tighten for that. That does not call for a tightening. I mean, the money supply is increasing actually slower than it should. There's no other signs of inflation going on. So I think this whole idea, do we see the tariffs and the debt? Everyone's saying, do we see it yet? If we see it, the Fed should tighten is really just totally barking up the wrong tree and beside the point. And this idea about going into inflationary expectations is just also, I think, extremely misguided. You know, with all the mainstream media hysteria.
The problem is that the tariffs, let's just assume it wasn't putting any inflation in the PPI. It put in month over month 0.9%. But let's just take that out. Let's just round it to 1%. Annualized, it's calculated to be anywhere from 3.1 to 3.3. Expectations are 3.9 from University of Michigan data. So that would mean that it would be at if you take out that 0.9 or just round it to 1, you take that out, then you're talking about a 2.1 to 2.3 or potentially a 2.9. So you need further data to determine if you should be cutting because you're not at the 2% target. Out of the data that's out there, there's approximately one piece of data that's suggesting that you're at target. If you do what this professor's saying to do, take out the actual effects of tariffs from the PPI, you're still two-thirds of the data is saying that you're above target. So why would you cut? Now, the question is, are we seeing some sort of demand shift in purchases? And I think that's what's happening. I think that there is a demand shift that's happening. So it will be fascinating to find out what's going on with the retail data. If it's not robust, then most likely the Federal Reserve will have to lower rates, even though inflation's running slightly hot.
April and May, you know, we really had the 1-year inflation expectations at 7.1% that I saw at the University of Michigan. I said, where did that come from? I said, not even the most pessimistic economists predicted that. And now it's coming down because people say, yeah, that was crazy. But what did that do to the market? Did that cause inflation? Did that cause anything bad? So this idea that it's filtering into expectations that's harming the economy is just not present in the data. My feeling is, you know, earlier on, you were talking about how important this meeting is on Jackson Hole. This is by far Jay Powell's most important talk at Jackson Hole. And in my opinion, if he just says, oh, we're going to wait and see, we have data on both sides, I think the market's going to take it very badly. I think that they really want him to say that data is telling us we really should begin our cutting process.
Maybe we don't have stag or inflation.
I started noticing hair loss here. I didn't want to go bald. I needed to do something. The Hims process was super.
Maybe we don't have stag or inflation. Maybe the Fed should just stand pat. I mean, are you convinced that the labor market is weakening right now? Because if we don't have a stag, if we don't have a slowdown, there might not be any reason to cut. I mean, I could see that. But do you think that those revisions we saw, did that change your viewpoint of, let's say, the last quarter of labor markets?
See, the problem that we're at right now is we have inflation that's slightly above the 2% target. All right, debate on if tariffs are really affecting inflation or not. Maybe not. But it's still above 2%. And you have an unemployment rate that's below 5%. I think the unemployment rate's at 4.2. So, does it really warrant the Federal Reserve to lower rates? But anecdotally, it seems as though people are having that sense that the job market isn't good, especially for the youth. So, what do we do? If the job market isn't doing so well, even though there's low unemployment, but higher unemployment for the young or the ones that are coming out of college, and retail sales are starting to drop, then the Federal Reserve might have to come in and do the quarter point. Even though unemployment rate is actually at a decent level, below the 5%.
We like at 30,000 a month or something? Are we that bad?
Well, I know, yeah. I mean, actually, I know I was pretty surprised. Goldman Sachs does some good analysis of what they think is the underlying rate. They actually said that it's down to 30. I don't think it's quite that low, but just the stop of the illegal immigration, most economists say that has cut that the rate of job growth, from maybe 250,000 down to 100,000. And maybe it's at a slower rate right now than it would. You would expect that to happen. The first half GDP, was really just a little over 1%. We did have a better second quarter than the first quarter. I think we're going to have some slowdown. This is a consumption tax. This is a tariff tax. It is bringing in revenue. It did allow the big, beautiful bill to lower some other taxes. So there is some stimulus on that other side. We could get some trade off of the deals that are made. Now, as you know, I'm not a tariff fan. I think that if we were going to do a consumption tax, which I'm in favor of, we should have done it much more across the board than we do just on foreign imports. Nonetheless, there is that other side, and very few economists are predicting a recession. A one-time slowdown, a bit of that slowdown, a little bump, but right now, just with this, going down to 100,000 or 50,000, or GDP temporarily 1.5% does call for lower rates. Listen, the short-term rate should be 100 basis points below the 10-year rate. And right now we're at 4.3, 4.25 on the 10-year, and that means we should be moving to the low threes on Fed funds. And that's really going to help Main Street. It's going to help those small firms. We see the Russell 2000 so responsive now to whether there's going to be a cut or not, because it's exactly those small firms that are borrowing short. Not the Mag 7, not the big firms. So you want to stimulate the economy, that's where you start. Lowering that short rate, I think there's really good cause for us to begin to do that.
August and September, historically.
Imagine bringing your side project to life just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want and watch it take shape.
August and September historically aren't great. Do you think we're in for a pause here, or
well, I think there will be a pause if Powell doesn't show flexibility, and then there's going to be you know what Trump's reaction is going to be, and then wow, we could see a lot of fireworks and really the naming of a Fed chair. Earlier on I said, at this point, if he's too late, and there might be signs he was way too late on the inflation. Boy, I mean, that criticism is going to come in, and his credibility is going to be down. And a shadow chair is a very difficult situation to have. So, in my opinion, the data supports lowering rates, and my feeling is that I hope to hear that Friday morning.
I mean, fighting the last battle is never a good idea, and that's why they're so sensitive about inflation and being, letting the cat, not burying it completely, and because they got so much grief, and maybe rightly so, considering what it did to, real wages and everything else when we got the 40-year high. But I've learned from betting. Whenever I bet on a team and they just are the worst, and then next time I'm betting, it's like I remember how bad they were, and I bet on the other team, and then that team always wins because fighting yesterday's battle that never works, and I think that's what they're doing right. But I'm not convinced they should do. Things might be where we're not inflationary or heading into a slowdown. That's also a problem. Everybody says stagflation. Maybe we got neither. Maybe things are sort of okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, stagflation is a persistent. In the 1970s, we had unemployment kept on rising. We had inflation of 8 to 10%.
Yeah,
for 14%. That is true stagflation.
We had a misery index year. We have like over 20.
Yeah, remember? I mean, we are just nowhere near. So people who say,
the markets have opened up, so we're gonna take a look at what's going on here. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,444. VIX is trading at 15. The euro is trading at 1.16. Oil is trading at $61.59. BITO is trading at 20.925. Japanese yen is trading at 147. Natural gas is trading at 2.85. Gush is trading at 21.16, and DRIP is trading at 10.27. Now, what I want to do is go over some of the resistance and support levels. So the S&P 500 is risk-taking right now because the VIX is trading at 15. The Japanese yen is in the 147 handle. So that's good. All right. Now, what is interesting is what's going on with oil. Oil is going down in the price action. So we'll go over that shortly here. But with the S&P 500 trading at the 6,445 mark, so you're going to have a resistance level at 6,500, all right? A lot of these traders like to just, in algorithmics, there's a psychological aspect to it when you see a zero at the end of a price. So that's going to be a resistance level. Until we hear something positive about tariffs or the Federal Reserve lowers rates, we're going to be bouncing around this 6,500 mark. Support level is at 6,250. Now, if you're trading SPY, if you're trading SPY, then it'll be 650 and 625 respectively. Now, BITO is the long for Bitcoin ETF, leveraged. You got to be careful because there's what is called leverage decay. So BITO is trading at 20.93. Bitcoin is trading at 115, almost 116,000. It went up all the way to like 121 or something like that, and then came back down. So the resistance level for BITO is going to be at 2149, and a support we're going to have a support level at about 20. right? So 20 for BITO, resistance level at 21.49. Now, Bitcoin may continue to go down a little bit before it surges back up to the 120 range. I suspect that there's more probability that getting closer to 110 than the 120 in the near future. Now, oil. OPEC produced a lot of barrels of oil. Now, I think that what's happening is that Trump is talking to the Saudis to actually try to lower Brent crude to reduce the amount of profitability for Putin to sell oil to India and China. So what I think is happening there is there's going to be, probably for a few weeks, a lower price for oil. A few weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, probably around 3 weeks ago, we were above the 65 range. So it was trading at like 65 to about 68, 69 range. Now we're below that. Now we're trading at the 60 to the 65 range. So right now, WTI is trading at 61.52. Last night, Brent was trading at about 65. WTI was trading at about 62. So I think the ranges in the near term are going to be 60 for the support level and 65 for the resistance level. Now, Boyle is an ETF to long natural gas. Natural gas is trading at 2.86. It dropped quite a bit. It was trading about 3 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago in the 3-handle range. It's trading at around 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, right? And then it started going down. It's been following oil, all right? So as long as oil is going to be suppressed, you're probably going to be in the 2.8, 2.9, maybe 3 for natural gas futures. Now, how is that going to affect Boyle for the ETF? So right now, Boyle is trading at 29.9. So you're going to have a resistance level at 30, and you're going to have a support level at 28. All right. Now, the question is, what's the range with natural gas? There's higher inventories for natural gas that came out last week. All right, and it dropped, and the price dropped in the futures market, and then it came back up at 2.8. 2.8, 2.7 is probably the bottoming out of natural gas. As we're moving into the fall season and the winter season, and more people start to use natural gas, then we are probably going to see the futures price go up, and then Boyle will go up. Now, Boyle can go up quick, all right? So you can be at 28 and go to 35 within days. It just depends on the price action of the actual futures market for natural gas. Now, also natural gas is a feedstock for fertilizers, and very important for industrial processes. If industry starts to falter, which it might happen, if industry starts to falter in Q4, then we're probably going to see a suppression of natural gas futures. But if industry stays somewhat right in line with their manufacturing, and we have a normal weather for the fall and the winter, where individuals need to use their heating systems, chances are natural gas will go up. All right, so natural gas range, I think there's a resistance level at 3. Right now it's trading at 2.8, and there is a support level at 2.814, and it's trading at 2.862. If it goes below the 2.8, then we're talking, all right, around a 2.7 handle support level. Okay, so, and then TYD is the ETF. If the prices of the treasuries for the 7 to 10 year treasuries go up, then TYD ETF goes up. So TYD is trading at trading at 25.03. All right. Resistance level is at 25.87, and support level it's almost right there. It's 25.02. If the price of the treasuries start to go down between the 7 and 10 year, so that's the belly of the curve, then the next support level is 23.96. Now, this equates out to, for the 10-year yield, 10-year yield is at 4.3. So if the 10-year yield keeps on inching towards 4.4, you're going to see the TYD to go down. But if the 10-year treasuries start, 10-year yield on the 10-year treasury yield goes to about 4.2 again, then you're going to start seeing that TYD is going to move closer to like 25.15, 25.25, something like that. So that's what you want to watch out for this week. We'll continue to cover it as it evolves throughout the week. But right now there is a little bit of movement in natural gas, but it's being suppressed because of the fall in oil. All right, with that, let's go back to some of the news here. All right. I want to take
Today, Bitcoin continues its retreat.
I want to take a look at. Let's listen in on reshaping industrial policy.
A group of Senate Democrats are asking President Trump to reconsider his decision to let NVIDIA and AMD sell AI chips to China in exchange for a 15% cut of revenue. The letter signed by Senators Chuck Schumer, Mark Warner, Jack Reed, Elizabeth Warren, and others. They're requesting details on that arrangement with NVIDIA and AMD by this Friday. We should mention that in those letters, the lawmaker said that President Trump's deal amounted to America negotiating away its competitive edge, critical to national security. They're also warning that selling advanced AI chips to China could strengthen that country's military. Meanwhile, plans for the government to take a stake in Intel could reshape industrial policy as well and national security. Joining us right now, former Trump economic advisor Stephen Moore. He is the co-founder of Unleash Prosperity, also former Biden Treasury Secretary Natasha Sarin. She's a professor at Yale and the president of the Budget Lab. What did I say? Oh, official, I should say, the Treasury Secretary. Okay, a big promotion. Natasha, nice to see you. Congratulations on the elevation.
Yeah.
Steve, I want to start with you, Steve, though, because I'm curious how you think. You've been a free marketeer. I do not believe you've been somebody who's believed in industrial policy over the years. And here we are in a moment where clearly we are careening towards that world.
Yeah, you're right, Andrew. I'm a big enemy of industrial policy because it's never worked anywhere or any time. The free market has been much more productive in terms of creating great industries for the United States. And by the way, we have a really good example of a failed industrial policy in the CHIPS Act, which was passed by Joe Biden and was supposed to revive our chips industry. And if anything, it hurt our industry more than it helped it with the subsidies. So I don't want to see. Now, there is and I'm not a national security expert, so I want to be clear about that, but there is some national security portion of this that may justify some of the subsidies that they're talking about. But with respect to making America number one in artificial intelligence, I want the government to stay as far away as possible, just like they did in the internet age, which created, the magnificent seven and trillions of dollars of increased wealth for Americans.
Natasha, what do you think of what's happening here?
So, Andrew, we've gotten to talk some about industrial policy and the varying ways in which we might choose to shape the economy and encourage more production in the U.S. of certain types of goods. I actually think and disagree with Stephen in the case of semiconductors and chips. We are talking about pretty significant national security exigencies, and the idea of being reliant on China, an adversary in this way, and then having such control over this particular type of technology seems like deeply concerning. And so I think we still have to kind of learn a bit about what the specifics are with this potential stake in Intel and what it'll look like. But the idea of industrial policy in targeted areas where we're concerned about national security actually seems like quite good policy to me. And indeed, I also disagree with Stephen on the CHIPS Act and think that that was an important step in that direction.
But Natasha, isn't this so interesting? This sort of strange bedfellows, everybody reversing, right? So you have, Schumer and Elizabeth Warren and Democrats who historically have actually been to some degree for industrial policy, right? Now, and by the way, for higher taxes generally for corporations and the like, now basically taking issue with the president over what historically, to some degree, they have liked. I mean,
it's simple to answer why that is. Why Elizabeth Warren is. If it's coming out of Trump's mouth, it must be bad. It must be bad. Everything that Trump does is bad, according to Elizabeth Warren. I mean, Pocahontas.
Would look at it like that.
So I think the thing about, and we've talked about this before, but the thing about industrial policy is we really have to be honest about what the trade-offs are. Industrial policy isn't always good. It doesn't always mean economic growth. It doesn't always mean lower costs for consumers. And it doesn't always mean better national security or less reliance on our adversaries. And that's why I think the idea of being sort of forthcoming about those types of trade-offs will lead you to the conclusion that in narrow areas of the economy where these national security exigencies are really quite significant, that's exactly where we should be talking about industrial policy. It's not for manufacturing writ large, it's for chips. And I think that distinction is pretty important, Andrew, and one that sometimes is missed in these debates.
I think it's more interesting.
Can I just have one point?
Hold on, Steve. Hold on. I think it's more interesting that our two guests here are fair as foul and foul as fair. If I understand the Democrat, anything Trump does, they're going to write a letter that they hate it. But Natasha is our liberal person, and Steve Moore is our former Trump guy. And but the Democrats, that's not interesting. Of course they're against it. It's Trump. They would, but Natasha just said you think it's pretty good policy, huh? And Stephen Moore has got his panties are all, or you're not allowed to use that anymore. But you're all bunched up in how horrible this is. Couldn't it be, Steve? This is an emergency that we have a foundry here that we need. And I think that's what Natasha's point was. We need to have the ability to manufacture chips here. And that was the idea of both.
That's the CHIPS Act.
That's the CHIPS Act. And this is like a corollary to that. It could be an emergency.
So let me take y'all back to a little over 40 years ago when I first came to Washington in 1982. The big issue back then was America needed a national industrial policy, not to defeat China, but you know what country it was we were worried about back then? Japan. And Japan was going to take over the whole world because they had a national industrial policy, we didn't. And then we avoided that route, and we went with the free enterprise system and free markets. And look at the world today. Our stock market is up 40-fold, and theirs has been flat. So countries that have tried industrial policy, look at Europe. Europe is the case study for industrial policy, trying to nurture certain
So
industries.
you think China's going to bring us down?
So show me where it's ever worked. Show me where industrial policy has ever worked.
Steve, you think we don't need to worry about China? If the extension of what you're saying is we don't need to worry about China because they will bring down themselves by overextending themselves and coming up with policies that don't make sense overall.
Well, let me be clear on this. I do think we have to worry about China. China is a very dangerous country, no question about that. What I'm saying is we will defeat them through our free enterprise system. They have a communist, centrally planned economy. Somebody show me anywhere in the history of the world where that has worked. So, you know, look, you guys are worried about this. Look at, we got the magnificent 7 countries all here in the United States. They're worth more than virtually all the companies in Europe, and in China combined.
I think the American economy is great. I think capitalism is so important, and I think we are so competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world. I also think it's a problem that 90% of rare earths are processed in China, and I think that these are real concerns from a national security perspective, and we need thoughtful policy to address them. So I'm kind of heartened, frankly, to be seeing some of these discussions.
Making sense to me. Cottrell on your side.
National security decisions, and Steve, you pointed out at the top, you're not an expert in national security. I mean, these are where, you know, tough issues and tough decisions come down to it. I don't like picking government winners and losers, but I don't like feeling like we are beholden to one country or another when their interests are directly opposed to ours.
But if we want more industrial production here, we did something very important that every Democrat voted against, which were allowing businesses to immediately expense their capital purchases, what they can use to develop chips here in the United States. That was a great policy.
I agree. Immediate expensing is a great policy. I disagree with other aspects of that bill that involve $3 trillion of deficit finance tax cuts to the top disproportionately. But I'm with you. I think that's good and important policy, as I think these conversations about industrial policy in the national security context specifically really are.
That was a Democrat.
No, it's just, Andrew's right. There's not a day that goes by when things aren't flipped.
This is totally flipped. This is like a flipped situation.
But President Trump. But more never flips. He will never flip.
You're not blessed, Stephen, for not flipping.
Joe, this is the CHIPS Act. I'm not flipped. This is what we believe in.
I got a question for you, Steve. You obviously spent time with the president. You were in the White House with him, showing on the easel some of the numbers. Have you had this conversation with him directly?
You mean on this particular issue?
Yeah.
With respect to the chips, no, but I did tell him that the incomes have been way up so far in his first 5 months in office, $1,000 increase, which was about twice as high as we have in 4 years under Biden. So look, I mean, I'm really bullish right now. Look at the headline today, Andrew, of the Wall Street Journal. Earnings are up almost across the board. What would investors not like about this picture?
All right. Let's take a look at another one here. All right, tariff impact on auto prices.
Stop the endless scroll hoping to find the one. Your perfect creator is already here. Would you trust a random ad or a real person's experience?
All right, 3 months after the auto tariffs kicked in, transaction prices are edging higher, with a couple of trends dictating which brands are charging more. Phil Bowe joins us right now. He's got to look at where prices are headed and which companies are upcharging. Phil, good morning. What's the answer?
Well, it's not that they're upcharging, Becky. It's that because of a variety of factors, they are asking the customer to pay more. And the customer is paying more, though sales are slowing down. Let me give you an example here. Sales slowing down for those particular brands. Let me give you an example where the transaction prices have gone up. Now, this is year over year. Land Rover is a perfect example where the tariffs had a huge impact, and as a result, Land Rover has essentially had to pass a lot of that on to their customers. Cadillac has been rolling out some new EVs at a higher price point. There's an explanation for each specific brand, but when you look at the overall transaction prices for the industry, comes in right now at $48,841. That is just a smidge under the all-time high, but auto prices in July compared to July of last year, up 1.5%. And the expectation in the industry is that it will continue edging up in the months to come. Though some brands, Jeep, Tesla, Acura, Chrysler, they've seen their transaction prices drop. Jeep and Chrysler, we know the issues that are happening at Stellantis. They're trying to correct those right now. Tesla, we've talked about the issue with it being brutally competitive for them right now, and as a result, they are trying to do whatever they can to increase sales. So as you take a look at GM, Ford, and Toyota, the reason that we're showing you these is that these are the mass market brands. keep in mind that they don't raise prices across the board. It depends on the model and the competition for that model. Let me give you an example. The Toyota RAV4. You might sit there and say, well, you know, are they raising the prices there? Not necessarily, because they might be looking across the street at a comparable model from Honda, and the prices have not gone up, and the dealers have to adjust to the competition. Bottom line is this: there is still healthy demand in the market, as you see with the July auto sales rate of 16.87 million. And we're well above 16 million right now for the year, which many people did not expect after the tariffs went into effect. But we are seeing a gradual increase in transaction prices.
Hey, Phil, you said we were just a smidge away from the all-time high. I guess maybe the newsworthy part is we're not even at an all-time high with these new tariffs that have come in. When was the all-time high, and why was it higher than now?
It was only a couple $100 higher, and it was a year or two ago. I mean, it's been hovering in that $49,000 range, Becky. So it's not off by much. And when I say we're only a couple $100 away from an all-time high, there are factors, seasonality within the auto industry that impact that. I would generally say we are there. We are really, really close to an all-time high, but it hasn't surged. And a lot of people thought once the tariffs go into effect, many people were predicting transaction prices on average will go well over $55,000. That has not happened.
Okay, because that's kind of what I thought too. The idea that you're not at an all-time high and you're not surging to these new levels, does that come down the road?
And you know why, Becky?
Why?
You know why? Because the automakers are generally eating the tariffs. Generally speaking, they are eating the tariffs. Not all of them.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, the margins are taking the hit. That's where you're noticing the impact. Let me look at the Q2 results. We saw it, GM, Ford, Stellantis. I mean, they're all taking a hit because they can't afford to say, I'm going to raise the price $7,000 when the guy across the street is still keeping it at the existing price. You have to do what the market is dictating.
You're only as smart as your dumbest competitor, too.
Exactly. It's all about competition.
They just saw the results, but what they did see was the sleepless nights leading up to it.
All right, 3 months after the auto tariffs kicked in, Trent. All right, joining us right now with more on the retail sector is Manny Chirico, LNK partner, BCI Brands chairman, and former PVH chair and CEO. Manny, first of all, thanks for being here. Why don't you break this all down for us? What are you going to be looking for from these earnings results? How much do you think we'll see on the tariffs front? How much do you think we'll see about the strength of the consumer?
I think business has been good through the second quarter. It's actually gotten better as the quarter got on, and back to school is off to a strong start. I expect second quarter earnings to be good pretty much across the board. I'm sure there'll be a few exceptions for underperformers, but I do expect the guidance for the second half to be muted and conservative. I think because of the tariffs. I think we're looking at especially in the soft goods retailer, footwear, apparel, accessories. What you're going to be seeing going forward is tariffs averaging somewhere between 20 and 25%, and that is a cost that the retailer is going to have to deal with. I think that the wholesale companies, the manufacturers overseas, the importers, are eating about half of that in this next 6 months. A combination of the retailer themselves and the manufacturer overseas. So I think you'll start to see prices increase anywhere from 5 to 10% in the back to school season, and particularly in the holiday season. And then I expect that to continue with price increase in the first half of next year as those prices all start to roll their way through to the consumer. I just don't. There's not a big enough profit margin for everyone to hold on and eat those tariff costs going forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that we will see in the most recent reports the impact of the tariffs, but there is this issue of how much was pulled forward, how much they brought in ahead of time, how much they've been able to dodge some of them, and with the tariffs maybe not fully kicking in. to some of these goods. I mean, this is a big question with Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed. Will we see inflation at this point, or do you think it's really just something that's slowly starting to wind in right now with back to school?
I don't think you're going to see inflation significantly in the retailers' margins in the second quarter. I think you're going to see the guidance where they start to talk about cost pressure and raising prices. And then the whole question about is how the consumer reacts to that. I think you'll look, the big box retailers, I think have the scale and a much more diverse basket that they can manage it pretty consistently. Specialty retailers and department stores, all soft goods, they're looking at tariff increases and those payments are due immediately on entry into the country. It's a seasonal business, so through July, minimal goods have come through with real tariff impact on them. But starting August and beyond, back to school, you're going to start to see the margin pressure. And as we get into the fourth quarter, you should really start to see the margin pressure. And I think you're going to see ticket prices across the board up anywhere from 5 to 10%. And what you'll see is planned promotional margin markdowns and discounts that'll be worked into the model, assuming that the consumer will push back a bit. So I think the earnings reports are going to be fine in the second quarter, and even the full year guidance, I think the retailers will manage it, but they're definitely going to be seeing pressure on costs in the second half of the year.
Let's talk about some of the retailers reporting this week. Target, Walmart, Gap, you've got Macy's reporting too. Who do you expect to be winners? Who do you expect to have a tougher time dealing with not just what they can get into the stores, what they can charge, what they can do in terms of the tariffs, but what they mean to the consumer too?
I think Walmart will continue to perform. The sense I have, and I don't have any insight into this, the sense I have is their sales have remained fairly strong. They've started to see a little bit of the tariff pressure in the second quarter, but it's been minimal. I think that will intensify in the third and fourth quarter. So I think their guidance will be conservative going forward, but I think their second quarter results will be solid. I think you mentioned the Gap. I don't want to pick on them, but I think the specialty retailers, their results may be fine for the second quarter, but again, just to say it again, I just think they're going to be under margin pressure in the third and the fourth quarter, and I think they're going to plan for it as they go, when they're giving guidance to the street. Everybody wants to under promise and over deliver, so I think they're going to build in some level of margin compression for the second half of the year.
And Manny, very quickly on Target and Ulta, the partnership that they had formed, that is, they're going to be going their separate ways. What does that mean for Target?
Okay, I think in that situation, strategies really just weren't aligned. I think, Ulta is a high-touch consumer service model dealing with the consumer, and Target is a value-oriented retailer, minimal customer support and service, store presentation. I just don't think the strategies were aligned. I think Target will have a harder time dealing with it. The availability of brands at Target will be more limited, and I think just the presentation will not be as strong. They'll look to make it up with more with value, but I think they have, I think in this environment, they're going to potentially use that higher end consumer that goes in there, that discretionary shopper. So I think they'll have more of a challenge to deal with it over time.
At KPMG, we make the difference by helping our clients turn risk management into a strategic.
All righty, so let's.
Today, Bitcoin continues its retreat from its new all-time high.
All righty. So what I want to do is cover some of the Zelensky meeting, but before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin that I have. This is an easy-to-digest multivitamin that has the cofactors that you need for enzymatic activity. When you take a multivitamin, it's important to rev up that enzymatic activity so your cells are performing better. Now, cofactors for enzymes basically means that it attaches to the enzyme and it changes the conformation of the enzyme so they perform better. So it's really important as a base, as a foundational part of your health protocol to have a good multivitamin and a good probiotic. And then you build off of that. So a great multivitamin as a foundation for your health protocol is the one that I have in my hand. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get this multivitamin. It has the vitamins and minerals that you need for proper enzymatic activity. Now, and it's easy to digest, which is another thing that is very important for a multivitamin. So please go to my store and get the multivitamin, the complete multivitamin. Now, another foundational piece to your health protocol is a good probiotic. And you stack, you take it together. You take the multivitamin, you take the probiotic. Now, I have two types of probiotic. I have the one in the powder form and I have one in the VeggieCat form. I take the powder because I take a lot of different powders, the collagen and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost and the lignans. So I take a lot of powder, so it's just better for me to mix it with my food for lunch. So please go to my store, get the probiotic. This one, you just mix it with soft foods or with just filtered water. Take it every day. And with a good probiotic, what's going to happen is you're going to improve the health of your gut biome. And by improving the health of your gut biome, you're improving your skin, your hair, your nails, your metabolism. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. You're going to notice that you have less irritation during digestion. In addition, by having a good gut biome, you're going to improve the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to be able to concentrate. You'll have less brain fog. And with proper sleep, you're going to slow down the aging process. Another very important feature of taking a good probiotic is your mucosal lining within your gut is going to get thicker. So your gut biome is improving. The mucosal lining is thicker. The lining of your gut is healthier. You have higher concentrations of IgA. Your immune system gets better, and you're reducing leaky gut syndrome. So it's really important to take a good probiotic. Good health starts at the gut. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotic, also get the complete multivitamin, stack them together. It's a great foundation to build off of. So please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Move on to global affairs for a moment. Ukrainian President Zelensky and European leaders are heading to the White House. They're due to meet with President Trump. That'll be later today. And that is in response to his Friday summit with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. Eamon Javers is at the White House, and that's the latest for us. Eamon.
David, yeah, as you say, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected here at the White House later today to help chart a path forward in the wake of those failed talks between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Also present, as you say, are going to be the leaders of 5 European countries who are part of a coalition of the willing backing Ukraine against the Russian invasion. Now, sources told NBC News over the weekend that President Trump engaged with President Zelensky and European leaders by phone early Saturday morning about the U.S. being party to a potential NATO-like security guarantee for Ukraine as part of a deal struck with Russia. Such security guarantees have been a key demand of the Ukrainians as part of any deal to end the fighting. Zelensky took to social media to set some expectations for today, writing, "I am grateful to @POTUS for the invitation. We all share a strong desire to end this war quickly and reliably, and peace must be lasting, not like it was years ago when Ukraine was forced to give up Crimea and part of our east, part of Donbass, and Putin simply used it as a springboard for a new attack, or when Ukraine was given so-called security guarantees in 1994, but they didn't work." Now take a look here at the list of European attendees at the White House today. It is a set of power hitters here. The president of Finland will be here. The chancellor of Germany will be here. The president of the European Commission, the NATO Secretary General, the prime minister of the UK, the prime minister of Italy, the president of France, all in the building here at the White House today. And the question for all those leaders is whether they can craft NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine that are enough like NATO to reassure the Ukrainians that they're real, and yet not so much like NATO that they're a non-starter for the Russian side, which feels very much threatened by the presence of NATO on their frontier. Guys, back over to you.
Yeah, even a lot of that seems contingent on European leaders' willingness or fortitude to supply troops to back up any kind of Article 5-like measure. There's some comments out of Germany this morning that maybe they might be a little too stretched to provide those boots on the ground as opposed to, say, the British.
Yeah, and then the question here is, in terms of the geostrategic implications of that, do you want NATO or Western forces backing up a Ukrainian security situation and engaging in direct combat with Russians in a year or 2 years' time? That is something that throughout the Cold War, NATO avoided. You know, the Cold War was a war of proxies, not a war of direct confrontation between the West and Russia, for fear that any such confrontation could lead to nuclear holocaust. The idea is you just can't have NATO troops and Russian troops fighting face to face because that can escalate very dangerously. And so the question here is, what kind of security guarantees are real and practical for Ukraine, but not so much that they're going to cause the Russians to walk away from that deal? That's very tricky. And of course, this is the first time Zelensky has been here since that confrontation with Trump and J.D. Vance in the Oval Office earlier this year. So people are sort of walking around, on tenterhooks, waiting to see what's going to happen here. Does this relationship blow up again, or is this a moment of real strength and unity? We'll see.
Yeah, that was the other contrast in photos over the weekend. The pictures from that Oval meeting in February where Zelensky was essentially berated versus the red carpet, the literal red carpet rollout that Putin got on Friday. Eamon will be with you all day watching these developments in a series of meetings in the White House.
Okay, let's go back to Bloomberg.
With this, do they continue with this strategy, or do they choose to sort of branch out in this other avenues? And the price there is a premium of about 80% over the stock's closing price in December, on December 18th. We go back to that day because that's the day we finally found out that they received an offer. And since then, shares have been rallying about 50%. Yeah, it looks like co-working places are a great idea, but just a very difficult business model.
Okay, very good. How about United Healthcare?
United Healthcare, another name on the move today, up about 2%. And this is more like extending the rally that we've seen on Friday when we learned that Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway and other investors bought shares in the insurer. Among those investors, David Tepper's Appaloosa, some of the world's wealthiest management, like George Soros investment firms. So this is great relief for this stock that has been so beaten down this year. Shares are still down about 40%. And I just had a look at their valuation. So the PE ratio there is about 18, which is lower than the 5 and the 10-year averages. So that tells you that those value investors are onto something there, but it will just take a lot of time to shift this boat around.
Tatiana, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Tatiana Dere covers all the markets for Bloomberg News. For more conversations like this one, subscribe to our new Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts. Spot them.
We're going to go to Fox News about Russia-Ukraine peace talks.
If you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base 44. I built this daily habit tracker.
And in just a few hours, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and other European leaders will be meeting with President Trump just days after his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska.
Doug Lazader joins us live from Washington with the latest. Doug.
Yeah, Todd and Carly, good morning. This is going to be a pretty crowded scene at the White House for this meeting today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is under enormous pressure, and he is not coming alone. He'll be joined by 7 other European leaders, hoping to make a unified stance in trying to hammer out a peace deal on the best terms possible for Ukraine. President Trump, meantime, already making it clear that Zelensky must be willing to make concessions. He posted this on Truth Social last night. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started. No getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired, and no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change. Today's sit-down is a follow-up to last week's big meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Trump didn't get a ceasefire deal, but he says he's pushing for a larger peace deal while also pushing Russia to accept security guarantees for Ukraine.
We moved the Russians significantly past where we thought they were going to end up. I had 6 separate sessions with President Putin before this, and I thought that we had some measure of success, but this was epic, what we achieved. I think that we are a whole lot closer to eliminating death on the battlefield in Ukraine and Russia.
Now, still, Zelensky is already pushing back against ceding land to Russia, saying Ukraine's constitution makes it impossible. Todd and Carl.
Yeah, and that's one of the many reasons why this is so complicated. Doug Zader, live for us in Washington. Doug, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in national security and military analyst Rebecca Grant. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. You know, Steve Witkoff said yesterday on several of the Sunday shows that Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska agreed that the United States and Europe can offer NATO Article 5 style protection, security guarantees to Ukraine, which is an attack on one is an attack on all. He said that this is the first time he's ever heard Russia agree to this and called it a game changer. This will be the topic of conversation at the White House today. So what does this mean for the United States and our troops in the future?
This means that we are much closer to ending the war in Ukraine. An Article 5 guarantee, that is the mutual self-defense guarantee. It's only been used one time when the European nations supported us on 9/11. So what we see here is the closest possible security ties short of NATO membership. And this really means that Ukraine will have powerful deterrence against a potential future attack from Russia. Implications for the U.S. will continue to stand with our European partners in NATO, and we'll carry that out through multiple domains, air, space, cyber, and all of that. It's going to look pretty similar to our current European force laydown, but including that mutual guarantee for Ukraine, if that's what's offered.
Dr. Grant, Axios is reporting Putin's peace terms. They are as follows. Ukraine cedes control of Donetsk and Luhansk, that, of course, being the Donbass region, freezing the front lines in Kherson and Zaporizhia, and the U.S. recognizes Russia's sovereignty over captured land. And the president appears in at least some posts and some indications from his administration to be okay with ultimately what Putin wants to do there. But are you concerned, as Zelensky has said, that giving Donbass to Russia basically gives Putin a closer staging area for a future invasion?
Well, I'd like to see every last Russian out of Ukraine. Who wouldn't? But as the NATO Secretary General is saying, this is going to be possibly de facto Russian control or occupation, like the Baltics after World War II, like East Germany back during the Cold War. No one's going to say it's not Ukraine's land, but to end the war, they will recognize that Russia stays in part of that. To me, the crucial piece for Ukraine is to get Zaporizhia, the nuclear power plant, to keep enough of the southern ports to be economically viable, and then to get the security and economic guarantees that will bring Ukraine forward, allow for reconstruction, and continue to make it a viable state with a viable economy.
Yeah, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was at the Alaska Summit, was on Mornings with Sunday Morning Futures yesterday, and he reiterated that President Trump does feel like it is Ukraine and Ukraine alone who can decide what territory, if any, they will be giving up. Here is also something that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said yesterday. Listen to this.
But here's what I can tell you for certain. You can't have a peace deal between two warring factions unless both sides agree to give up something and both sides agree that the other side gets something, right? Otherwise, if one side gets everything they want, that's not a peace deal. It's called surrender.
So what do you think it will ultimately be?
Well, and today's meeting, this is bigger than Alaska. This is the European leaders and Zelensky with an excellent package for Ukraine going forward. And I think that Zelensky, as President Trump said, probably should take this deal. They are coming to Washington to show that this is the best possible deal everything included, whatever the details may be. And I think it will be a very positive step for Ukraine coming out of the White House today.
Quickly, before we let you go, there's been talk of a trilateral meeting as soon as Friday, this Friday, like 5 days away, between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. Do you see that happening that soon?
Well, who knows? But I'm telling you, keep that threat of the sanctions in place, and Trump has got to keep the pressure on Putin so this doesn't drift along. They should head for a trilateral meeting as soon as possible after today.
And the president's posting a big day at the White House tomorrow, meaning today. Never had so many European leaders at one time. My great honor to host them. He also said big progress on Russia. Stay tuned. We certainly will. Dr. Rebecca Grant, thank you for joining us.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.
I ordered 200 hand-forged knives to my dormer.
President Trump welcoming Ukrainian President Zelensky to...
Before we go with Fox News about Zelensky could walk out, which I doubt he will, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will help with your immune system, and this will help with your brain function. Magnesium is super important for brain function. In addition, vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin, your immune system, and brain function. You can take these together. It's a powerful stack. And beware. It's important for you to start thinking about how to improve your neural health. Now, you do that with proper supplementation, taking magnesium, but also make sure you detoxify your body, you drink filtered water, you stay away from processed foods, you get enough sleep, you do the proper exercises, resistance training, cardio, balancing exercises, balancing. Those are all very important for neural health. And a lot of people would say, why? Well, when you do balancing exercises and stretching exercises, you're actually activating your cerebellum. Now, when you're doing resistance training, you're activating a different set of nerves and neurons that are helping with contraction of the muscle. And cardiovascular health is super important because you get better blood flow to create the microenvironment that you need to maintain the health of those neurons and to improve the neuroplasticity. So it's really important for you to protect those neurons and keep that inflammation down. Because by keeping the inflammation down, you're keeping the health of the myelin sheath intact. And when you do that, you will have more vitality as you get older. So it's really important to protect your neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. It's a great combo. Also, I have a very high quality toothpaste. It's made from structural nanosilver. It's gonna whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help bring down inflammation at the gum line, increase the health of the gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're going to reduce the chances of valvular issues and vascular issues. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the very high quality toothpaste that I have. It has no fluoride, very high quality. Get a few tubes for your household and help to support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. Get the products that I have on my store. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. And if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Washington today after the historic summit with Vladimir Putin in Alaska Friday. A host of EU leaders also arriving in D.C., all hoping to help the president and Zelensky hammer out a peace deal with Russia. But President Trump posting this on Truth Social last night, President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started, getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired and no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change. I want to bring in Kansas Senator Roger Marshall. Senator, I want to get your reaction to the tone we heard from President Trump in that post last night. It seems that his plan may be to apply some serious pressure on Zelensky today to come to an agreement, but that means that Zelensky has to agree to give up land.
Yeah. Cheryl, good morning to you and to all your listeners. I want to remind everybody that this is Joe Biden's war, but it's also the European Union's war. So
the bottom line is this: if Zelensky continues on the war, the probability of Zelensky losing not just 20% of the landmass, he's probably going to lose 35% of the landmass. Both sides are exhausted, but there's a little bit of momentum in favor of the Russians. So it's better to cut your losses now. Zelensky is the probability is that Zelensky will lose unless there's some major offensive that the Europeans are willing to do and that the United States is willing to sell the arms, which leads to further probability of potential tactical nukes used. So it behooves Zelensky and the whole international community to actually take the deal. Zelensky lost. That's a fact. He lost. And he doesn't have manpower. He's having a hard time recruiting. But both sides are exhausted. So if he doesn't take it, the war will continue on. Rubio said this yesterday, that if there is no peace agreement or no ceasefire that happens in the near term here, this is probably going to continue on for another year or a year and a half. Now, what's the probability in a year or year and a half that Zelensky loses more land versus gaining what he lost? Zelensky doesn't have a good choice. He has to take the deal.
think about this. Every day, Russia sells $600 million of oil and gas. Europe is purchasing 10% of that. Europe purchases 51% of Russia's LNG. Look, we've been babysitting Europe since World War II. We have 100,000 troops. We're spending $50 billion a year there. This is the EU's war. They need to be stepping up and applying pressure, not just on Zelensky, but on Russia by stop buying their fuel. I mean, how many drones would that pay? So yes, I'm afraid we're at a point that Zelensky has a choice. Does he want to keep fighting, and he's not going to win this war against Russia, or is he ready to say enough? Let's stop the killing. Let's get the children back, and that's President Trump's goal, and that would be my goal.
Well, let me follow up on that, because President Trump has made it clear he wants this to end. He calls it a meat grinder, and that's really what Putin is doing. And Putin is paying an exorbitant amount of money. With money that he's getting from, to be clear, oil and nat gas sales to China and to India, but he's using that money to pay new soldiers. He's offering these financial incentives to get more and more soldiers to sign up and fight. It's a war machine. His economy has almost become a war machine, and that's something that Vladimir Putin may not want to see end. So if there's not that wherewithal from Putin, unless he gets the land that he wants, and Zelensky says, I need security guarantees, are you and your colleagues willing to promise and help the Europeans with those security guarantees? That seems what this meeting today really, the crux is the security guarantees to Ukraine. Otherwise, Zelensky's not going to say yes. He's going to walk out with nothing.
Yeah, so I want to go back and emphasize, you mentioned that China and India are buying oil and gas from Russia, but so is the European Union. Can you imagine during World War II, America buying cars from Germany? But my point on this, yes, we're willing to have some type of security guarantee, but it cannot be unlimited. Europe has to be first. Europe needs, I just wish Europe was as anxious to put their soldiers on the front line, to provide tanks and weapons, but as anxious as they are to come to Washington, D.C. and kiss the ring. EU needs to stand up. Look, their economy is 10 times the size of Russia. Russia has an economy the size of Italy. Europe's had almost 4 years now, and they made the promise. I went over there right after this war broke out. They all promised, we're going to crank up our GDP, our percentage of GDP spending on the military. They don't do it. So they've been sitting on this time bomb for at least 4 years. And to your point about Putin dragging these wars out, that's his modus operandi. That should not surprise anybody. His culture is different. He doesn't have the same value of life that you and I have, that your listeners have. He's very willing to sacrifice Russian soldiers in order to gain more land, and that's his psychosis.
Well, and that is why the line is, can Putin be trusted? And eyes were open going into this summit on Friday. Eyes were open for sure with the administration. There's some other things going on here politically in the United States. California Governor Newsom just unveiled this new state redistricting map in response to Texas's own redistricting. His proposed map could potentially reduce California's Republican U.S. House seats from 9 to 4. That means Democrats could be filling 48 out of the state's 52 districts. He's pledging to end the Trump presidency through this effort. We're going to have former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Sunday Morning Futures on what this is really about. Watch.
Gavin is now trying to run for president. So what he's proposing to do is go against the Constitution of California, have the legislature vote to take these lines. They don't even draw these lines. They just introduced them this Friday when no one's paying attention. They let in Washington, D.C., the DrPaulCottrell send them these lines. And you got to think about what this means to California. Now going against the Constitution, but instead of having 9 competitive seats, they will only have 2. So it's not a 5-seat change. This is a 9-seat change. They take in counties, they go split counties 116 times, cities 145 times. This independent commission took 35,000 different comments coming in. Even the legislators not even commenting. This is politicians picking the voters, not the voters selecting their elected officials.
Senator, your reaction to those comments from him?
Well, Speaker McCarthy is spot on that it's all about Gavin. Gavin. He's so selfish. This is all about his run for presidency. It has nothing to do with what he thinks is doing what the right thing is, to do justice. So he's spot on that. Look, California has been the king of gerrymandering since the 1980s and 90s. It got so bad that eventually the people there elected a special commission that would form their districts there. They did that, I think, in about 2008. So it doesn't surprise me. On the other hand, let's look at Texas. Texas population has grown, I think, some 7 million people, 7%, I believe, 7% since the census is out. So they have a reason to do redistricting. I do think that the people moved there are more on the Republican side of things. But this is all about politics to Gavin Newsom. All he cares about is himself and his political future.
Well, and he keeps saying he's fighting fire with fire, which is what many of these other governors have said, despite the fact that they've been doing their own redistricting for years. We've seen it in New York. We've seen it in California. Here we go again. Senator Roger Marshall, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it this morning.
Thank you.
They keep outperforming me. And call me crazy.
We're going to go to Gordon Chang predicting China's slowing economy. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lozenges and the drops. We're going to go into the fall season and the winter season. Be prepared. The moment you have that irritation, take the lozenges and the drops right away to mitigate the problem. If you, and many people don't know this, but if you have just a benign, mild cold, let's just say, 3 times a year, all right? It takes you approximately 9 weeks to go through that and to heal the body. And if you're doing that every year, that's a big part of the year. When your body has to heal from even something mild, it's weakening the immune system over time and slowing down the aging. It's increasing the aging process. So it's weakening the immune system and speeding up aging. What you want to do is mitigate the problem by taking the lozenges and the drops. And when you cut the number of times that you don't feel well or that you're sick, then if you stop that chronicness, then the body has more time to heal other tissues, focus on other things. And when it does, then what you'll notice is that you're aging slower. So chronic, even mild colds, but you have 2 or 3 a year, let's say it lasts for a week or 5 days, takes 2 weeks to heal. So that's approximately 3 weeks for every time that you have a mild cold. Now, if you have something more severe, it's going to take it out to 3, 4, 5 weeks to actually heal, even though you feel better. Just because you feel better after going through a cold spell doesn't mean that all the tissues are healed. It takes time to heal those tissues, because some tissues go into irreversible necrosis and some reversible necrosis. And so it takes time for the body to remodel. It takes time for the body to heal. And as it's healing, it's not going to be able, you're using your energies to heal, and it's not going to be able to focus on some other areas of your body. But if you have this chronic pulse, what's going to happen is you're going to actually age faster. You look at people that get sick regularly, do they look like, be honest, do they look like that they're aging quicker? Especially once they hit age 40? Of course they do. And if it's more severe, then obviously they're aging even faster. So it's important to mitigate the problem right away. When you mitigate the problem right away, then you're reducing the long-term effects of what is happening with the body post the cold. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the elderberry zinc. I have this in stock. You get a 21 in each bag. The drops are a little bit smaller. You get 100 in each bag. You can get it in honey and lemon, cherry, and also in blueberry. But get a few bags for your household. Have some at home, have some at work, and mitigate it right away. If you have a family, make sure you have a bunch of this available, because you know how that works. Someone from school, one of the kids come home from school and then they infect the whole family, right? And it goes around and around. And it takes like 3 weeks for everyone to get through it. And sometimes it recirculates, depending on how healthy your family is. But the point is if you cut it right away, if you have that irritation right away, take the lozenges and the drops. They're very high quality and it works. Now, be prepared. As we're getting into the fall and the winter season, you're going to hear a lot of people having razor throat. All right? It's coming. It's coming. Be prepared. Or don't be prepared. It's up to you. I just told you how to mitigate the problem.
Same old phone? Nah. Upgrade to the new Galaxy Z Fold 7.
Wave goodbye to summer and hello to savings up to 30% during Raymore Flanagan's Labor Day sale.
President Trump says there are no imminent plans to sanction China over its purchases of Russian oil, but will reconsider that option in 2 to 3 weeks. This after his landmark summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Maria spoke with South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham about this on Sunday Morning Futures Watch.
It came to Alaska because Trump threatened to put a 50% tariff on India for buying Russian oil and gas. What's the weakness of Russia? Almost all of their income comes from oil and gas sales. If we went after the customers of Russia and said you had to pick between the American economy and buying cheap Russian oil or gas, they would pick the American economy. So here's what I would say about President Trump. He's the only guy that can do this. And my advice to President Trump and Marco is if you got to convince Putin that if this war doesn't end justly and honorably, with Ukraine making concessions also, we're going to destroy the Russian economy. We have the ability to do it. To Europe, why don't you put tariffs on India for buying Russian oil? To Europe, why don't you threaten China with tariffs for being the largest purchaser of Russian oil? To Europe, you can do more. If Europe and the United States banded together and we told Russia that if this war does not come to an end, we're going to destroy your fossil fuel economy.
And a new Fox digital op-ed making the case, quote, Trump's Russia play isn't about Ukraine, it's about China. It reads in part, Russia today is the weak link in Beijing's strategy. Moscow's dependence on Chinese capital markets and diplomatic cover has grown dramatically. Trump's aim is to pry the axis apart. There's also growing worry about India and China's relations beginning to thaw even after the extension of the tariff pause between Washington and Beijing. I want to bring in Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, your reaction to that? The Trump's Russia play isn't about Ukraine. This really is about China, and that it is China and India that is keeping the Russian economy strong.
Well, certainly, China and India are buying Russian oil in large quantities. They're keeping the war going. And it was right for President Trump to impose the 25% tariff on India on August 6th. But he also needs to cut off the flow of cash from China, because China is a bigger purchaser of Russian oil. You do that, it means no war in Ukraine eventually, because that's where Putin is getting the resources. You know, as for the policy of trying to split Russia from China, that sounds nice, but I think that it's impractical. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping see the world in the same terms. They've been partners for more than a decade. They identify the same enemy, which is the United States. And so, yes, maybe it's theoretically possible to pry the Russians away, but as a practical matter, it's extremely difficult. In Trump's first term, he tried to pry away North Korea from China. That didn't work either. I don't think this will work.
And now you've got North Korea, sending troops to Vladimir Putin. And in the middle of this is also this conversation about whether or not this fall there's going to be a meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping. How does that component play out in your mind, Gordon?
Yeah, I don't think that we should be meeting Xi Jinping, especially with relations the way they are right now with China. I think it's important for President Trump to impose those tariffs on China for the purchase of Russian oil, because it's really unfair. I mean, and India has been a friend and a partner of the United States, and we're aggravating them. Now, I don't think that we can drive India into China's arms, because China is, in fact, trying to break apart India, and we've been helping India defend itself. But nonetheless, this is not a good look for the United States. And so until we can sort out a lot of things, especially trade, I don't think that we should be meeting the Chinese.
What about the Chinese economy? Because the data shows that it slowed down substantially for the month of July. Beijing officials say it's on our shoulders. They say it's U.S. protectionism. Economists claim that there's a lot more going on. A 4-year-long real estate value crash in China. And then, of course, these new policies aimed at slowing factory production because they're not getting the orders from the United States. And then there's a new Bloomberg story out that says China's $11 trillion stock market is a headache for both Xi and Trump. And it reads in part the poor long-term performance of the nation's equities has hampered consumer spending. Gordon, what really is happening with the Chinese economy?
The real problem is that communism favors production over consumption. And what we have seen right now is that the consumer economy, which accounts for maybe, 38, 39, 40% of China's GDP, is just not able to sustain China. So it's a structural flaw. Yes, President Trump's tariffs have hurt at the margins, but that's not the real issue. The story is, you look at the July numbers, and the one that is really the most troubling for Beijing is the drop in demand for bank loans, which means that companies don't see a future use for money. And so they're not borrowing. Banks don't want to lend. China is trying to use the bond market to compensate for this. But this is really a failure of the economy as a whole. And when you add in the price numbers, which shows deflation is continuing, this is a structural problem. This is the problem of communist economics. And it's going to get worse until Xi Jinping decides that he is going to try to make consumption the basis of the Chinese economy. But we know he doesn't want to do that for a lot of reasons, because that would offend, for instance, Communist Party core constituencies, which he desperately needs right now as he's struggling with other leaders for power and influence.
Yeah, because he's under pressure, and he is reportedly had been very weakened, and in particular not even running the Chinese military right now. We've seen those reports. At the same time, I can't help but wonder if, based on what you're saying, if that makes the trade negotiations between the U.S. and China even more important, not just for him, but for the entire country. We can't. If we go back to 145%, that sinks them even more. And to put it in layman's terms.
Yeah, when you look at it arithmetically, if you're not going to have consumption as the basis of the economy, you've got to sell to the rest of the world, and that's Xi Jinping's only plan right now. And the United States accounts for, what, 34% of global consumer spending? It's a market which is indispensable for any country that has an export-dominated economy. And China is more export-dependent now than it's been maybe in its entire history. So right now, yes, this is a very critical matter for the Chinese. And it's not just us. It's Europe. You see other countries, they are moving away from China as well. So that means that there is no solution for Xi Jinping to rescue an economy which is failing badly.
An isolated China is a weak China. There you go. Gordon Chang, it's always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Parties to a negotiating table and to keep them there. And then finally, you need a deal that both sides can walk away from the table and say to their respective constituencies and to themselves, we won. Frankly, guys, I mean, I've been wrong before. I just don't see any of these four factors present in the current circumstances.
Aaron, what's the likelihood that President Trump will effectively wash his hands of this whole thing and just kind of let the Europeans deal with the Russians?
I mean, so far that approach, walking away from the table, appears to have not cost him much politically on just about any issue. Walking away from the table, I worked for Bush 41 and his immensely talented Secretary of State, James Baker. Baker threatened to walk a couple times with both Israel and Syria, and it worked. But then again, there is no James Baker here, and there is no Bush 41. So yeah, walking away from the table, if it's meant as a tactic to get the parties to get serious, both of them, I might add, can be an effective tactic. But walking away with no strategy, walking away out of disgust and frustration, walking away because you really don't want to press both sides to the end game because your attention is easily distracted and lies elsewhere, that's not a good one.
Now, what about the last time? I just have to point out, President Trump met with Zelensky. It didn't go so well. There was a shouting match. There was a briefly pause of military aid to Ukraine. Are we expecting something a little bit more civil this time around?
Yes. I would expect the answer is yes. I think, and again, I don't know what the reason for this next step would be, but I think Mr. Trump would like to have one more round. You have Anchorage with Putin, you got Zelensky and the Europeans in Washington. I think President Trump would like to have a trilateral. Now, if in the wake of that, he could walk away, he'd have a little more credibility, but I don't see, frankly, the point of the three-way meeting right now. And Zelensky has to make a decision. Is he going to shake the hand of Vladimir Putin while Vladimir Putin kills Ukrainians? Literally yesterday, today, tomorrow, coming week, without any promise that that meeting would lead to, at a minimum, ceasefire. He's in a bind, and Trump put him there, as did Mr. Putin, who, to use the president's words right now, by the president's own choice, I might add, because Trump has many cards to play, but right now, Putin's got them all.
Yep.
And Trump appears not to want to take any of them back.
Aaron, you referenced Secretary Baker back in the Bush 41 White House. Where is the State Department in this White House? Where is the Secretary of State? It just seems to be Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone. Is that kind of where it is? And where
that would be my read. I mean, I worked for half a dozen Secretaries of State in both political parties. I mean, I think Marco Rubio, probably of all the national security team that the president put together, is clearly the most knowledgeable, and before he accepted this job, sympathetic and empathetic to many of the policies, including the dissolution of USAID. that Mr. Trump has presided over. So, no, I don't think Marco Rubio is an effective Secretary of State. To be an effective Secretary of State, you need the supreme confidence of the president. You need to be a really good negotiator. Baker and Kissinger come to mind. One other thing, you got to be willing to sit your boss down and say, you know, you are not headed in the right direction. And I have a way we can try to make this better. He's not willing to do that. If loyalty is key here. Blind loyalty is a disaster. And if Marco Rubio isn't willing to say to the president, or Witkoff for that matter, the envoy for everything, this isn't going to work. I mean, what value are these advisors?
Right. Aaron, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Aaron David Miller is a senior fellow, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace down in Washington, D.C., joining us via Zoom for what will be promises.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight formula. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. It's going to allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep a night and deep sleep that will allow you to be well rested when you wake up, detoxify your central nervous system, and to consolidate memory. Super important for an anti-aging protocol. By getting enough sleep, you are slowing down the aging process. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to early onset of dementia. Chronic sleep deprivation leads to memory issues. Chronic sleep deprivation leads to higher levels of cortisol, and higher levels of cortisol chronically will suppress your immune system. Higher levels of cortisol will do damage to your organs and your vascular system. So just getting enough sleep does a lot in terms of healing your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight formula. And another great formula to help with your pancreatic health is to take the digestive enzyme complex. Digestive enzyme complex will break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids to allow you to absorb your nutrients easier. It's going to allow you to put less load on your pancreas. It also has bromelain in it, which is fibrinolytic, so it breaks up clots. And digestive enzyme complex has proteolytic enzymes that will break up glycoproteins, which was super important back in 2020. If you remember, I told you, take digestive enzyme complex back during the crisis. Why? Because of bromelain. Why? Because the proteolytic enzymes. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. Reduce the load on your pancreas, break up those carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Super important. So a great stack would be get the Goodnight formula, take it at night so you get the good sleep that you need, and take the digestive enzyme complex to break up the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
The dream was travel and freedom, but the reality is just work in different time zones. You know what ruins a vacation? It's not the flight delay or the overpriced.
We're following what the papers are writing about this big summit at the White House later today. The Wall Street Journal editorial has a new piece asking what kind of peace in Ukraine. It reads in part, President Trump conducts foreign policy on personal instinct and tactical impulse, and his abrupt Friday turn on Russia and Ukraine is a classic illustration. Whether it's the start of a road to peace or to appeasement is impossible to know. We're not sure if Mr. Trump knows himself. No wonder Russian commentators and Putin and allies were celebrating the summit's results. Their president ended his isolation in the West, made no public concessions, and can continue killing Ukrainians without further sanction. The president can say all he wants, that this is Joe Biden's war, not his, but like it or not, what happens next is on his watch. A defeat for Ukraine will echo at home and across the world for the rest of his presidency. Well, the editors of the National Review, meanwhile, they're also writing about the No Deal Summit and the path to peace in Ukraine. In part, their story reads, quote, Putin can claim wins of more consequence than a photo op. Above all, he dodged any requirement to pay a fresh price for his failure to agree to a ceasefire. This is a significant climb down by Trump. This matters. Without a preliminary ceasefire, it will be hard to proceed to the more formal armistice that remains the most likely form of eventual peace deal. For any American intervention to be successful, before long, it will, however chummy the talks in Alaska, have to involve more stick as well as carrot. Trump should remember that while patience is a virtue, being a patsy is not. In the aftermath of the meetings, he wants to hold off on further sanctions for now. That's fine. But in the absence of progress toward a ceasefire, in fairly short order, he should resume turning the sanctions racket. David Ignatius, and that's two conservative points of view, clearly coming from the more hawkish, traditional Republican Party point of view. What's your take on what happens now outside of the White House and outside of this meeting? If things carry on this path, are there any avenues for the Senate, for the Republican Party to carry on putting pressure on the White House to support Ukraine, or does it all really hinge on this meeting today?
So, Caddy, President Trump has shown that he's able, really, I think, to fend off Republican pressure. And although Lindsey Graham and others,
despite what those papers might be writing,
yeah, well, I just think recent history shows us that. One way to think about what's happening today and in the succeeding days is this war has been about whether Ukraine can become a Western country. That's been the aspiration of the Ukrainian people, and it was intolerable to Putin and to Russia. And Russia really fought a war to prevent Ukraine from becoming European. If the United States today, by offering security guarantees to whatever part of Ukraine emerges from the war intact, so that that country can be, as South Korea became, as West Germany became, a part of the West with our guarantees of security behind them, then that's an outcome that's going to make for a more prosperous Ukraine. In the long run, I can't imagine that the rest of Ukraine won't move as East Germany moved with West Germany. That's down the road. But the key thing is whether the United States really will stand behind Ukraine's sovereignty against Putin. If that happens today, then I think there's some reason for optimism. If it doesn't, it's a cave into Putin's power.
Hey, David, it's Heilman here. On a little bit on where you just ended up, but more a couple of unanswered questions from the first block of the show. I know there's obviously these European leaders who are coming are not all of exactly one mind, but I think it's fair to say that there's, broadly speaking, among all of them, a certain set of concerns. What's the downside scenario for this group? They're showing up there fearing the worst. The worst looks like what today?
So, John, to me, the worst would be Trump leans on Zelensky to give up all of the Donbass, this area in eastern Ukraine. Zelensky refuses for political reasons. He says, I can't, it violates my constitution and my people don't want it. And the Europeans, although talking tough, don't stand up to what will be Trump's demand. You've got to give up that territory. This is the peace deal I made for you. And they stand behind Trump rather than Zelensky. That's the scenario that I view as most threatening. At the end of this process, you'd end up with Ukraine having to make concessions without getting anything sufficient in return to guarantee its security.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How much do you think
I used to feel like I was playing cat and mouse with my clients, always chasing them for payments, but now I get paid without the exhaustion. It makes sense that zero users who use the online.
How much do you think Ukraine will be willing to give up if, in fact, they get a rock-solid security guarantee where the European countries and Donald Trump say, we're going to be in Ukraine, the U.S. is going to be supporting us, we're all going to be rebuilding your country, and we're going to tell Vladimir Putin in no uncertain terms that an attack against Ukraine is attack against the United States and Great Britain and France
and Germany and Italy and the EU. At that point, when he gets that rock solid assurance, if he gets that rock solid assurance, at that point, do you think the land deal can be made?
So, Joe, he has to be able to sell this to the Ukrainian people. And they have suffered in this war so much. Just think about bombardment every night, spending much of that night awake, which has been the case for much of this year for Ukrainians in Kyiv and elsewhere. He has to sell it to this, war-weary people and say, we got something. We're giving up this land, and it's a dagger in our heart. But what we got was security, our ability to be a free European country. So I think it depends in how this is phrased. If the appearance at the end of today is of the Western countries, the United States and Europe, marching together with Ukraine, even as it makes this terrible concession of land, that may be something that Zelensky can take home, and the Ukrainians would say it was worth the sacrifices we made. But there's a lot of resistance to it. Again, I just share with your viewers the feeling of standing in St. Michael's Square, looking at pictures of the Ukrainians who died in Donetsk and Luhansk since 2014. There are hundreds of photos, as far as you can see, of people who died in this war. So giving it up is not going to be easy.
John Meacham, there's also another interested observer today, and that's going to be Xi Jinping of China, who's going to see what the U.S. and the West is willing to do to stand up for a smaller country invaded by a larger one. So speak to us just about how precarious this moment is, big picture here, as we really barrel into this new century with the sense of, almost a return to a great powers setup where, there's spheres of influence and potentially aggression can be rewarded or at least go relatively unpunished. John? I think we've lost Beecham's
John either froze or he fell asleep. And, considering... John...
I had a lot of wise things to say there.
Well, yeah, but it looked like you were in the middle of one of your over 80s matches at your country club. John always asked if he can play the over 80s bracket. And
it's very important to be able to play with.
I'm just going to interrupt them for a second. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality deodorants. It's a dual purpose product. It's going to help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a daily deodorant. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, or in citrus. Made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Has no aluminum, no baking soda, all natural ingredients, super high quality. It's for males and females. Use it every day, and you're helping to detoxify your body. Super important to do. Get a couple bars, help support the work that I do, and help support your health and wellness. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Also, get the cleanse or Max 35. Max 35 or cleanse will help to boost up your immune system. You take a teaspoon a day, every day. You swish it in your mouth and gargle 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow it. It'll help the epithelial lining, maintain that mucosal barrier, and boost up that immune system. If you're not feeling well or people around you are not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day and then go back to your maintenance dose once everything is all clear. I've been taking Max 35 or Max 14 or Cleanse for 5 years, over 5 years, every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get this very high quality product and boost up that immune system. It's part of a 4-pillar protocol. The foundation is the multivitamin, the probiotics, and then the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are Cleanse, Max 35 or Max 14. Take it every day to boost up that immune system. C60 to soak up those free radicals. The 3rd pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up that immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. Brings down inflammation. And the 4th pillar, boomer boost. Rev up that metabolism and increase those energy levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use that as a protocol, and you will notice that your body is healing and your body is slowing down its aging process and boosting up its immune system, and your endocrine system is going to get into homeostasis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Now, you can customize your health protocol, mix and match items. I have many ways. You can buy anti-aging boxes. You can purchase the longevity boxes or purchase individual items and mix and match. But pay attention to how to stack these. And when you stack them the way I'm telling you to, you're going to get the max benefit. The max benefit for your health, but you're also getting the max benefit based on the dollars that you're investing in your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos.
The oxygen tent.
Yes. Exactly. All right. Now, John, you're being paid to give deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts. The deep thought here to Jonathan's question is, it is a great power competition. We are, interestingly, in 2025, back to 1914. This is interesting question whether is this the pre-World War I era that has reasserted itself at the end of what we all took, the lessons we all took from World War II and the Cold War, which was an implacability and unconditional surrender. One of the reasons I think this conversation is uncomfortable for a lot of people conversant with American history is that we didn't really talk about negotiating in the middle of the 20th century, right? We didn't talk about doing this after FDR announced unconditional surrender in the Second World War, somewhat surprising Churchill at Casablanca. We didn't talk about it so much during Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, because we had made a stand. It's a long twilight struggle, and we represent the West. And as Ronald Reagan said, his view of the Cold War was, we win, you lose. This is not that, right? This is something in between. And I think it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me to think, okay, we're going to abort this aggression, but yes, you get a collective security agreement. Okay, but you wouldn't need it if the aggression had not happened. So what is all that? That's the tragedy of history. And so what we're going to see today in Washington is a remarkable gathering of European leaders who are trying to find the best, worst option.
So, David Ignatius, as we...
Turn your best idea.
David Ignatius, as we wrap up the segment, I want to read from you something from the New Statesman on Friday out of Britain. And I read it to you because you knew Dr. Brzezinski so well. This was a review of Zabig, Ed Luce's biography on Dr. Brzezinski, and the parallels are striking. This summer, in between hosting J.D. Vance and visiting Switzerland, David Lammy, the foreign minister of Great Britain, had been reading Edward Luce's Zabig, The Life of Zbigniew Brzezinski. The book charts the intellectual political rivalry between the Polish-born U.S. diplomat Henry Kissinger. While Kissinger championed a foreign policy centered on the great powers, an approach Lammy regards as cynical, Brzezinski consistently advocated for smaller countries, noting how they can act as geopolitical pivots, which Lammy considers to be overly cynical. And of course, as you know, starting in 1950, Dr. Brzezinski said the Soviet Union will fall from within, most likely when these small countries start breaking away. And of course, it was his own home country, Poland, that did that. I am struck by watching Donald Trump's foreign policy approach, seeing how much it reflects Kissinger's, in that it's about the great powers. It's about China, Russia, America, and everybody else be damned. Well, that didn't work. Brzezinski's smaller countries, where you look at the Polands, you look at the Ukraines, you look at the smaller countries in the orbits of these larger powers to actually see where it matters. So I'm fascinated how history repeats itself and how we're actually looking at in what we've seen thus far in the Trump administration, more of a Kissinger great powers détente approach that in the end was a historical failure.
So, Joe, it's a great point. Trump so far has been about the big guys, you know, the big deals between the big, powerful leaders with whom he feels affinity. Dr. Brzezinski had the genius to see Eastern Europe as a series of individual countries, each of which mattered in a different way. And I would say, as we look at the events today, the United States and all of its European allies, and it does seem like this is an alliance again, are treating Ukraine as an individual country with its own aspirations and a deep yearning to be part of Europe. It's something Brzezinski would have loved. I remember in one of our conversations, he spoke about the way in which the Ukraine moving west toward Europe could be the first step of a broader process that would finally bring Russia, balance between Asia and Europe, and more towards the West. That seems impossibly far away now, but that was part of Dr. Brzezinski's vision. And let's hope this intense focus on Ukraine is getting away from the big guys and thinking about the little guys and their security.
The Washington Post's David Ignatius and historian John Meeson, our thanks to you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Good.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. It is Monday morning and I'm joined by Niall Stanage. Nice to see you, Niall. I hear you had a long journey over the weekend.
I had an arduous journey during my fatherly duties. I was moving stuff for my daughter from Charlotte to New York City. So it was a 10-hour drive in a moving truck. What more fun could you have on a weekend?
Good man, good man.
How was your weekend?
It was just fine, yeah. Happy summer weekend, enjoying some nice weather. It was intensely hot yesterday.
Let me get this straight. Either his kid is going to college or his kid is working in New York. But I find it absolutely absurd that a parent is helping their kid move. Absolutely. That has never happened for me. All right? Never. All right? But I'm Gen X and, you just do things yourself. But it's amazing how in today's world the parents coddle the kids. It's absolutely amazing. Unbelievable. I know.
Good weekend. Well, we should get.
When I was managing my department over at Catholic Charities, there were people that would be being interviewed, not for my department, for a different department. They would be bringing their mother in. I mean, come on, man. I mean, bringing your mother to an interview, sitting in the lobby, waiting. I mean, that is so crazy, right? Why would they do that? Why would people do that? This younger generation bringing their mothers to an interview. Now, the mother didn't walk into the interview. The mother just sat there in the lobby. But I would never hire someone that did that. Never. Not in a million years. Because what does that mean? It means that the employee needs to have their hand held by their parent. So I see this all the time now in New York. You get the young transient types that are coming in. What they do is they get the ones that I've seen. It wasn't for school. It was more for work. So they come in and their parents help them move into their apartment, right? So you see it all the time in New York, right? But the thing is that I come from a generation that you do it yourself. You move yourself, or you get a bunch of movers, 3 men in a truck or whatever, and you have it moved. You don't have your parents do it for you, no matter what state you're moving from. What it is the parents are coddling the kids, and these are the types of kids that are coming into New York right after college, and let's say they get a job. It's not that they're low; they're on the low end of the totem pole, right? Usually, they're like analysts or something, and they're transient. They can't take the stress. It's a high-cost environment. You have to work a lot of hours, and you're going to have to just put in the time. And these individuals that have been coddled by their parents, they never make it. They end up leaving New York within 3 years. They're very transient. The ones that stay are the ones that have the grit, that can weather the storm. All right? But these ones that come in, that are helped by their parents, almost all of them fail within 2 to 3 years. And they have to go run back to mommy because it's cost too much. They worked at the job and they hate it, or it's just too stressful or whatever. But they don't have the fortitude. When you raise kids where you have to move them, you literally have to help them move to New York. Why? A 25-year-old, 24-year-old? I mean, come on. These kids, and so people, the Gen Xers, or people that have more fortitude, right? They'll take advantage of these people. They'll look at them and they'll just crush them.
And to business as usual, Robbie. So what is on your radar?
I suppose we shall. Well, the historic peace summit between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin took place this weekend in Alaska, with the two nations coming somewhat closer to achieving a lasting peace in Ukraine. Now, those who had hoped this meeting would result in an immediate end to the conflict were left disappointed. However, top U.S. diplomat and negotiator Steve Witkoff said that Putin had agreed that Ukraine would receive a NATO-esque protection guarantee, which would protect Ukraine from further Russian aggression after the war. Now, that's a key component, obviously, of any peace agreement. Ukraine can't simply agree to lose some territory now if it remains the case that Russia will resume the attack later or at some future date. But
if you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base44. I built this daily habit tracker that helps users log small wins, track their mood, reflect on past and
later or at some future date. But on the Ukrainian...
So this girl that's doing the advertisement for Base44 is doing a self-tracker. Well, why can't you use that app, the health app, or the note app on your iPhone? See, you got to pay attention to the news. You have to pay attention to the advertisers. You have a company that gets a lot of seed money from a bunch of venture capitalists to make a business. Let's say Base44. All right. Now, people that have money, they don't need this crap. But what they do know is that the average Joe out there, the middle class, the wage earner, will get the thought that maybe the American dream they can reach by working really, really hard, right? And working for the corporation and be a wage earner, and one day maybe they'll make money. So they convince you, the middle class, oh, if you have a great idea, just use our platform, Base44, and you'll have a great idea. Maybe you'll be a billionaire. Maybe you'll be a millionaire. You'll be so successful. The far majority of these people are going to write bullshit apps that no one needs. But yet, Base44 will get revenue, get subscription revenue, and then eventually go IPO. And guess what? You have a bunch of investors that are even more wealthy. And it was It was on the backs of people making bullshit apps.
It's unfortunately the case that President Zelensky will likely have to agree to territorial concessions in order to bring this conflict to an end. There's a dawning realization among even the most staunchly pro-Ukraine commentators that the war simply will not end unless Ukraine agrees to let Russia keep the conquered territories. The alternative is a drawn-out conflict that kills thousands more Ukrainians and results in the entire country coming under Russian control. The skillful diplomacy of Trump, of Witkoff, and of Secretary of State Marco Rubio is designed to avoid that outcome. Indeed, Rubio's done a terrific job this weekend of schooling the reflexively hawkish voices in the mainstream media who think any public display of respect toward Putin is somehow emboldening him in the Russian takeover of Ukraine. Media pundit after media pundit complained endlessly about Putin receiving the red carpet treatment, riding in a fancy car with Trump, being treated with decency as befits his station as an important world leader. In fact, popular liberal ex-personality Brian Krasenstein called on the U.S. government to assassinate Putin.
I would think that a couple thousand nuclear weapons aimed at the United States makes them pretty powerful, and that you should negotiate. Put them on the world scene and like go, we need to talk. A lot of people are forgetting. The Cold War ended when the Berlin Wall fell, but did it really end? We still have tons of nuclear weapons aimed at the United States. Now we have tons of nuclear weapons aimed at Russia. So don't you think that we should talk? I would. I don't want to be nuked.
As soon as he set foot in Alaska, which is obviously an insane idea, I don't think I have to point that out. By comparison, the mainstream media was a bit more restrained than that. They're still quite furious that Trump was being nice to Putin. Look, being mean to Putin was going to work, then Joe Biden would have already succeeded in ending the war. He didn't because diplomacy is a bit more complicated and subtle than just screaming Putin bad at the top of your lungs over and over again. Rubio made this point expertly during his time.
Sound familiar? This is the reason why the Democratic Party is failing, because they keep on saying Trump bad always.
Station with ABC's Martha Raddatz. Let's watch.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that, and Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. I don't even pay attention to it anymore, but I will tell you this. Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine.
And then here's a bit more from that clip.
He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, it elevates him. Well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin.
Rubio has it exactly right.
Sick of hearing your boss ask, but where's the proof? After every marketing meeting, you need market data. That's why there's SimilarWeb. With SimilarWeb.
Rubio has it exactly right. We can't end this war by refusing to give Putin attention or the spotlight or whatever it was that Raddatz was complaining about there. Frankly, the argument she's making sounded to me like she was calling for, deplatforming Putin, like she's saying he should be kicked off Twitter or something. We shouldn't be surprised to hear a mainstream media personality, of course, returning to this very familiar well. Liberal and progressive media personalities love the idea of deplatforming people because they have an almost religious faith in censorship and silencing. These are the preferred tactics of the mainstream media folks, who imagine that if they can't hear or see people and opinions they don't like, must mean those sinister forces have been defeated or swept aside. You'd think they might have learned by now that this tactic usually backfires, and in any case, Putin is not an account that can be suspended, or an idea that can be banned, or a phenomenon that can be ignored, or a military power that can be defeated. He's a political figure who must be engaged with. And lest anyone think the meeting was nothing but pleasantries, President Trump gave Putin a letter from the First Lady, Melania Trump, asking him to end the war for the sake of the children who are suffering because of it. Mr. Putin, she wrote, you can single-handedly restore their melodic laughter. Now let us all hope and pray that this meeting is followed by further diplomacy that ends this horrific conflict. And we'll be talking later in the show about the Zelensky component of all this. But there were a number of media interviews Marco Rubio did over the weekend where he faced basically a version of that question. You know, aren't we like normalizing Putin or something by shaking his hand? But I mean, what good would it do to invite him here and be insulting to him? How would that help end the war? So I was very perplexed by that, because this was a media obsession over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I've a bit of a different view, as I think I do, of the conflict writ large. I mean, I take some of the points you made, and the Brian Krassenstein idea is absolutely nuts. That's the World War III, and there's some snipers that take him out as soon as he walks off the plane. I mean, that's like a ludicrous idea. I think that the situation in Ukraine is genuinely complicated and difficult, because I think perhaps a little bit more than you take the argument that you can't just embolden Putin or have no deterrent to him doing this kind of thing in the future, whether it's in Ukraine or elsewhere in Eastern Europe. And to my mind, the Alaska summit was one where Putin accomplished more of his aims or got more of his desires than the United States did, because there was no immediate ceasefire, and whatever about smiling or red carpets or whatever, it did, I think, reduce the isolation of Russia. I don't think it's necessarily about platforming or deplatforming. It's about having this meeting where he is welcomed on equal footing, as if we're just having a kind of casual discussion, rather than a man who has invaded a neighboring sovereign nation and thus instigated a war that has now lasted more than 3 years.
Yeah, I just don't know that the isolation, though, if I thought isolation was going to bring the war to a close, then I would support, playing hardball to a greater degree. And Trump has countenanced playing hardball to some degree. He's been frustrated with Putin. He's threatened sanctions, but of course, previous sanctions have done nothing. A greater form of isolation has not deterred Putin from continuing this conflict. So then I think we have to consider the possibility, and I was very happy to hear Witkoff say that apparently some kind of security guarantee, not NATO, but a security guarantee for the rest of Ukraine is on the table. I mean, that's the best deal they're going to get. Is it not? I can't imagine a more favorable situation for Ukraine than what is still under Ukrainian hands remains Ukraine, and there is an understanding that Russia could not invade again because it is now under the protection of, it's not actually NATO, but under the protection of Europe or us. I don't see, and that is a good deal, because they're not at risk of further invasion. I can't imagine anything better than that coming about from this.
If it is a deal, if those security guarantees are ironclad and dependable, the question is really to what extent or with what specificity will those security guarantees be offered? Because as you just alluded to, obviously the nightmare scenario for Ukraine is they make a deal, they concede some kind of territory, and then Russia just comes back a year, 18 months or 2 years, and storms back in again. So that's why it's very important to have these guarantees. Let's see how the meeting today goes, because I think there's going to be a lot of concern and scrutiny as to whether the pendulum swings back to a fair return.
And I hope those security guarantees really bring Europe into the picture for being responsible for Ukraine's defense or protection, not getting the U.S. more involved in this region. I don't really think that's something the American people want very much, but we will discuss the Zelensky and Ukrainian component of this in a bit.
We certainly will. Meanwhile, did the State Department just change the international?
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this stack that's really important for your neural health. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. Ubiquinol is going to soak up free radicals, reduce stress in the cell, help with the health of the mitochondria. Your energy levels are going to increase, your ATP levels will increase, and ubiquinol will help protect neurons. Another great supplement to take, you can stack it with ubiquinol, is taking my NAD plus supplement. This will increase your NAD plus levels. This will help to bring up energy levels, repair DNA damage, and NAD plus helps to protect neurons. So this is a powerful stack. You can stack this also with C60 and with Clarity Factor. There's many ways to stack this. But this is a powerful stack to protect those neurons. In addition, make sure you drink filtered water, stay away from processed foods, and do the 4 modalities of exercise: balancing, stretching, cardio, resistance training. Very important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Ubiquinol and the NAD Plus supplements. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Click the link in the description to get to the website. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's go to Bloomberg.
I think, because the LPs were pounding the table on the needing of DPI, so distributions per invested dollar, the GPs listened. So then the environment has been more accommodating for the exit. So apart from the IPOs, apart from the M&A activity that's involved in the IPOs, there have been some GP solutions to provide liquidity to investors as well. So you hear the secondary market is alive and well and growing and at its peak, actually. And then you have CVs, so continuation vehicles, continuation funds, and then you have LPs leading the way to do this, and not even to mention new forms of capital coming into the market with the democratization of private equity.
So at Brighteon, I know you guys invest in new private equity managers,
yes,
as well as doing your own deals. Talk to us about the capital markets for middle market deals. Where's the debt coming from these days?
Interesting question. Well, the debt's coming from, you'll see banks like the JP Morgan get back into understanding that private credit has stepped in and they are now providing other alternatives in addition to what they have done in the past. But private credit is also alive and well and providing some debt financing. The good news about where we focus, which is the middle market and the lower middle market, because that's where we believe the alpha is in private markets, is that these are generally companies that use lower debt. So that's a very important metric for us when we get involved in investing in those companies. But you're right. What we have done is found a space that really wasn't occupied to provide investors with alpha in light of the big firms getting bigger. So we have a different strategy that sort of complements the mega funds.
And Elizabeth, in your notes, you say the U.S. economy remains strong. Interest rates could start moving down again soon. How soon do you think?
Well, it's hard for anyone to predict.
Yes.
I know what's going on in Jackson Hole this week. We'll all be waiting with bated breath. But, I think conditions are such that, at least my personal opinion, is that there's certainly room for a moderated, lowering of the interest rates. And that will, of course, be a nice boost for the private equity markets and deal making and liquidity providing back to the investors.
Are there industries that you guys like more so than others these days? Because it seems like you have to have AI in your pitch book somewhere in your deck somewhere, but how do you guys think?
Yes, no, it's a great question. We've been focused on really finding this unique off-market, high alpha private deal flow. So the reason we all came to private equity in the first place. And as the big firms are getting bigger, the returns are compressing. And so we think about sectors, to your question, in the sense of really who's starting the firm. So we're actually putting entrepreneurs who are starting new private equity firms in business. For the first time in history, we have people, I think over 50% of the private equity firms in the US are over 20 years old. So people inside of those firms have 15 to 20 years of experience in a certain sector with a track record you can verify. And for one reason or another, notwithstanding the terrible fundraising market, they are leaving to start new firms. This is when you can get alpha. So on a specific sector, it's really about, we tend to back the athlete, for lack of a better term, and where they've had success. And if the conditions that led to their success in the past, we deem are available in the future, then we put them in business, and then we'll co-invest with them, and then we'll do direct deals on our own.
How do you talk to your clients about, there's a lot of geopolitical tension, a lot going on in the news and the headlines. We hear it. We have the U.S.-Russia summit, then we have the Putin summit. How do you talk to your clients about that and put them at ease?
Yes, it's a constant source of conversation with respect to how it might impact U.S. private equity, and where our focus is U.S. private equity in particular. We also have an office in London, so we do get involved, and we back European managers as well. So as it relates to the deal environment, it's absolutely a factor we take into consideration. But we can't wait for it to be resolved, and we do go ahead and do find deal opportunities. And I think that the conversations with our investors are usually robust because we tend to back investors who have an opportunity in hand at that moment. And it's usually a deal that has resulted from a dislocation in their own sector. And so all of the macro factors have been taken into account about the projection of how that deal might do going forward with them.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds here. How bad is the capital raising environment these days?
It seems to go to new lows as far as the availability of capital every year. So we're at a new low right now for the private markets, and it's the worst since 2016. It's bad, particularly for the sector that we focus on, which is more of these new emerging managers in private equity. Capital from LPs is consolidated to the bigger players, and they're expanding their franchises. So for us, it's an opportunity, but for anyone launching a new platform or for people coming to market again without a distinctive strategy necessarily, that's a tough road to hoe.
It mirrors what has been happening in the hedge fund business as well.
Yes.
All the money's going to those big platforms. Elizabeth Weymouth, thank you so much for joining us. Elizabeth Weymouth, founder and managing partner of Graphene Partners and a double UVA. A lot of time in Charlottesville, undergrad, and then the Darden School. The Darden kids, they just work too hard. I mean, that's why I didn't go. I'm like, I just got out of 3 years of being investment banking grunt. Now you want to work me even more so? Okay, sorry. All right, Elizabeth Weymouth, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Markets absolutely doing nothing here today. The NASDAQ down 50. We're waiting for the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and then, of course, Texas. A lot more coming out. This is
They keep outperforming me and call me crazy, but I hope they never stop. Everyone thinks I have a team, a full-on 5-person operation, but it's just me and Notion.
And we're now just hours away from the president meeting with President Zelensky at the White House. So what kind of meeting are we going to see? Will it be like the last time we saw these two at the White House in February, where they got into a shouting match and the meeting ended shortly after? Will there be one-on-one talks like their chat ahead of the Pope's funeral in April? The two actually met again in June at NATO, where both men walked away, seemingly having to have moved past that February blow-up.
He was very nice, actually. We had rough times, but sometimes he was couldn't have been nicer. I think I'd like to see an end to this. I do.
Joining me now to talk about this, John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor and former U.S. ambassador to the UN under George W. Bush. Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
I've heard a lot of people talk about this meeting with Putin over the weekend in not great terms. You say there's a silver lining to this bad summit. What's that silver lining?
Well, I think it's a mistake from Ukraine's perspective to try and seek a ceasefire before serious negotiations begin. Now, that's a minority position. I certainly concede that. But you have to look at the history of what happens in these kinds of disputes when you have a ceasefire along the existing battle lines. There's a very grave risk for Ukraine that the battle line gets frozen, and as talks drag on and drag on and drag on, that ceasefire line becomes the new boundary. I think Ukraine, if it has the support of Europe and the United States, and that's a big caveat, should continue the struggle against Russia, if at all possible, should try to put some of Russia's gains in reverse and show to Putin that the use of force is simply not going to prevail. That would be the better outcome. And now Trump, by saying he doesn't want a ceasefire, may wake the Ukrainians and may even wake the Europeans up to the danger of the ceasefire scenario.
I also want to ask you about the security guarantees. We're hearing from Steve Witkoff referencing this, talking about a potential security guarantee that is not being in NATO, not having Article 5 capabilities, but somehow would make Ukraine borders safe. How did you interpret this? And do you believe it, given your experience negotiating with Russia?
Well, I listened to Witkoff's answer to Jake Tapper yesterday several times, and the more I listened to it, the less I understood it. After he mentions Article 5 light guarantees, he talks about enshrinement in Russian law of a commitment not to seek further territorial gains in Ukraine and not to seek further territorial gains in Europe generally. I don't understand what the connection is if he's talking about counting on Russian promises and Russian laws not to commit further aggression. We've got a long history where that hasn't been the case, dating back to the days of the Soviet Union. And I don't understand how Article 5 fits in there. I'm more worried actually now by reports that seem to be more and more common in the news media that what the president told the European leaders and Zelensky in his phone call after the Alaska summit was that Putin's proposal was, give me all of the Donetsk province that my troops don't already hold, and then I will commit not to seek any further territory. If that's the deal that the president and Putin agreed on, it's going to run into a brick wall when they pass it on to Zelensky.
We're hearing from the president on Truth Social, and you came in for criticism, where he was basically arguing people like yourselves are kind of talking in a way that prevents peace from happening, that prevents the end of this war. What's your response to that, and even sort of how the president is approaching Russia in this process?
Well, I think the criticism he's making is silly. The old saying, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. I think the president's approaching this process because he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think he's worried that it may be slipping away from him because if, as I think most observers saw the Alaska summit, I didn't see any retreat by Russia from any of the principles that Putin and others have been articulating for years. And I don't see any real signs that whatever Zelensky might say would come anywhere close to accommodating the Russians, meaning that while peace is possible always at some point down the road, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And that means that the president's hopes of getting the Nobel Peace Prize are getting more remote. I might also just say one small point. The NATO Peace Prize rules require that nominations for the year in question, that would be 2025, have to be submitted by January the 31st. So, of course, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, I suppose, can always ignore its own rules, but if they stick to their rules, Trump's not eligible for it this year anyway.
Before I let you go, what do you want to hear out of this meeting today, and specifically from European leaders who obviously all scrambled to be here? I don't even know what success would look like for them coming out of today. What do you think it is?
Well, as I say, my view on the ceasefire question is very much a minority. So I expect the Europeans and probably Zelensky will continue to push for a ceasefire and let Trump answer why he doesn't want one. Trump and I happen to agree, coincidentally, on the ceasefire point. His reasons are different from mine, and I think incorrect. He thinks he can get to a full-scale peace plan more quickly that way. I don't think that's possible.
John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor and former U.S. ambassador to the UN. Thanks so much for speaking with us.
Well, thank you.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking about it. Meet Base44, a complete AI creation platform.
President Zelensky is in Washington for talks with President Trump on the future of Ukraine. It follows Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin on Friday that yielded no agreement nor a ceasefire. Well, today he's accompanied by 6 European leaders and the head of NATO in a show of united support for Kyiv. Top of the agenda for the meeting this afternoon then are U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine and Putin's demands for Kyiv to give up the Donbass. Well, in the lead-up to that meeting with Trump, Zelensky met with the U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg. Here's a bit of what he said during that talk.
We are thankful to the President for this invitation and the formal we will have with important signals about security guarantees. And he said that's why it's important that we are together with the United States and Europe. And we will speak about the architecture. I think so. We will have time to speak about architecture of security guarantees, and this is what really, I think, the most important.
Well, let's cross to Kyiv now, where our correspondent Emmanuel Shaz is standing by for us. Emmanuel, what are Ukrainians expecting from this meeting today? Are they feeling optimistic on the whole?
I wouldn't say Ukrainians are optimistic. First off, because the memory of the previous meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump in the White House in February 28th this year is a really vivid memory of humiliation. Hearing talking about security guarantees, Ukrainians would like to know what exactly would that entail, and also, of course, it's been decades that Ukraine have been promised it would be protected and its borders would be respected, not least when Ukraine abandoned its nuclear arsenal during the Memorandum of Budapest in 1994, and even more so when a treaty was signed in April 2004 by no other than Vladimir Putin, who had recognized the borders of Ukraine as they are enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution since the independence of the country. And it's really this crucial question of territorial integrity that Ukrainians are looking at right now. They wonder what Donald Trump will expect Volodymyr Zelensky to agree upon, because time and again Volodymyr Zelensky said that it would not be possible for Ukraine to legally acknowledge the loss of what amounts to around 20% of its territories. If we look at what is already illegally occupied by Russia, and even less so, Ukraine wouldn't agree to give up Donbass, to give up the remaining 30% of the Donetsk region, which is still under Ukrainian control, because this would amount to also abandoning the tens of thousands of people, civilians who are still living in the region and who do not live currently under Russian occupation. So there's a lot of, anticipation. I wouldn't say optimism. I would rather say worry here in Kyiv.
And in the meantime, not much has changed on the ground, has it? I mean, Russia launched new drone attacks on Ukraine, and there have been some Ukrainian strikes on Russian sides as well. Bring us up to speed on that.
Absolutely. Well, first off, Ukrainians woke up to the news not only of the trip to Washington of their president, but also of new strikes against a number of Ukrainian cities overnight with drones and missiles in the city of Kharkiv. There's at least 6 people who died. Over 17 were injured, including the people who died. There was a 1-year-old child among the injured 6 children when a residential building was hit in the Zaporizhia city. 3 people died, over 20 were injured in those strikes. This is just to show, we've been reporting on those strikes day in, day out, and those strikes do not stop, and neither does the Russian offensive on the front line. And Ukraine is also trying to defend itself by striking Russia in its economic heart, I shall say. We know that in an oil pumping station, that's the general staff of the army here in Ukraine, which reported it, an oil refinery station has been hit in the region of Tambov in Russia, and those strikes are usually long-range strikes by Ukraine. They show that Kyiv also wants to, hinder Russia's war effort by trying to grip the machine, by crippling the Russian economy, but also preventing oil refineries from bringing petrol to troops, and in doing so, trying to grip the Russian army in its advances here in the country.
All right, Emmanuel will, of course, be continuing to check in with you as that meeting gets underway later today. But for now, thank you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
As a mom of children with allergies, it's hard creating a game plan that helps provide them.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. The olive leaf extract is a dual-purpose supplement. This supplement is going to help your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Brings down inflammation and helps your lipid profile. Take it every day, super important for cardiovascular health and your immune system. I like providing products that give you dual purpose, right? So please go to my store, get the very high quality supplement olive leaf extract. And you can stack it with C60. You can get C60 in avocado oil, in MCT coconut oil, or even extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. C60 is a very potent antioxidant I've been taking C60 since 2016. It slows down the aging process. It's going to help with your skin. It'll help with your immune system. It'll help with your endocrine system. Helps with your glands, your thyroid, your vascular system. When you soak up these free radicals, what's going to happen is that these different systems, and at the cellular level and the tissue level, the stress goes down. And the mitochondrial health will improve. So you have more energy in those cells, in those tissues. So the tissues perform better because it has less stress. You're soaking up those free radicals because free radicals causes damage. So if you're soaking up those free radicals systemically, then what's going to happen is you're slowing down the aging process and you're increasing your energy levels. In addition, C60 helps with your neurons. It's going to help the mitochondria in the neuron, reduce the stress in the neuron, help maintain that myelin sheath. The neurons will communicate properly. You'll have the energy levels in the neuron to produce the neurotransmitters. This means that you'll have positive neuroplasticity. C60 stacks very well with clarity factor, NAD+, ubiquinol, resveratrol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach, for best absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout. It's going to soak up the free radicals that are generated during your workout, and you will recover quicker. Taking C60 every day, especially as part of a health protocol, is super important. It's the second pillar of a 4-pillar system. Now, what's the health protocol? But the starting of it is the foundation. And that's the multivitamin and the probiotic. Then the pillars on top of that foundation. Max 35, Max 14, cleanse. Taking one of those every day will boost up the immune system. The second pillar is the C60. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's a very strong antioxidant. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, lignans. That's going to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. The fourth pillar, boomer boost. Rev up those energy levels and metabolism. And so you're targeting all those features that you start seeing declining during the aging process. So you're targeting them and you're giving your body the nutrients that it needs to slow down the aging process. So take C60, and you'll notice after just 2.5 months or so, improvements in your body. You wait, you take a look at a year of using this, and you're going to notice that you're aging slower just by looking in the mirror. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. This is a very high quality supplement, and if you stack it the way I'm telling you to, you get some major benefits. This is something that I've been doing for years. I've been taking C60 since 2016. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and a great stack is the C60 with the olive leaf extract. But again, C60 can be stacked many different ways. Like I told you with the healthcare protocol, and you can build off of it, or you can customize this the way you want to customize it. But if you stack it the way I'm telling you to, and you can target multiple systems. So you're targeting your free radicals by taking the C60, and you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system with olive leaf extract, and they work together. Because by bringing down stress and soaking up those free radicals is going to help your immune system. Olive leaf extract also helps with your immune system by bringing down inflammation. And olive leaf extract helps with bringing down LDL levels and helping to improve your HDL levels. That means your lipid profile is going to improve. Less LDL that's oxidized means less plaque buildup. By soaking up free radicals, you have less oxidized LDL. By having less LDL from the olive leaf extract, you have less plaque buildup. They work together. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Historic day. I mean, as Tom Keene started off our morning this morning on surveillance, a historic day at the White House today. The leaders of some of the leading European countries, along with President Zelensky from Ukraine, coming to the White House to meet with President Trump. And we want to get a sense of how that might go and how the president might approach this delicate situation. And there's absolutely no one better to get inside the head of President Trump than Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor for Bloomberg Opinion. He has a long history dealing with President Trump for decades.
There's
here in New York
There's some
City.
breaking news.
Tim,
There's some sort of suspicious package at Times Square right now.
Item, whatever was found has been deemed to be non-hazardous. So, late word in just to our newsroom, whatever was found, that suspicious package in Times Square, police have deemed it to be non-hazardous. So that is the good news. Alex,
Okay.
should we?
All right, so it looks like a false alarm.
And now we're seeing it, it's his preference for how he acts and thinks diplomatically. He personalizes these situations. He likes to conduct a lot of the negotiations in the dark. We don't get good records about what's being sought or what's being said. And at the end of the day, it's hard to separate how much of this is about Trump's own self-interest and how much of it is authentically geared toward constructive national security policies, and in Ukraine's case, a stable and safe and economically viable Western Europe.
Wrong button. There we go. So Trump's meeting with Putin, it raised concerns among European leaders, and we were just talking right before you came on here, saying like they're kind of hovering around, like protecting the little brother in a way.
Yeah.
But can you dig into the European leaders? I mean, they have a stake in this.
They have a stake in this, and I think, of course, some of it is about protecting an ally, but it's also they're concerned about their own futures. It's no secret that Putin has had designs on the Baltic states for some of the same reasons he's had longstanding designs on Ukraine. And so those countries are well aware of it, as are the succeeding neighboring countries in Scandinavia and elsewhere in Western Europe. And I think they rely on the U.S. for a guarantee of safety and stability, and they don't see this as limited solely to Ukraine, and no one should. The idea that the U.S. itself doesn't really have anything to profit from protecting Ukraine or ensuring a stable Europe is just short-sighted, and it contradicts very hard-won historical experiences that have taught us otherwise.
Tim, do you believe President Trump is committed to doing the hard work to get a just peace with President Putin? Because it seems like President Putin has most, if not all, of the leverage, if not the least of which, time.
Well, and the question is, why does he have leverage over the United States? We can understand why he has leverage over Ukraine. He's been willing to churn hundreds of thousands of troops out of Russian prisons into Ukraine to keep a war going now for 3 years. But that shouldn't grant him leverage over the United States. And Donald Trump went into the meeting on Friday in Alaska saying that he was going to seek a ceasefire before peace negotiations could begin. And within the short span of that meeting, he did a complete about-face and sort of threw the chips onto Putin's table. So we have to ask, what is Trump's interest in doing that? Why does he believe that Putin has leverage over the most economically and militarily powerful country on the planet? It is not in the U.S. interest to negotiate this way.
One of the things I do believe that President Trump really feels passionately about is he's so abhorred by the pain and suffering and killing that's happening in Ukraine. I think he really personally wants to stop that. Is that enough for him to get tough with Putin, do you think?
Apparently not.
Okay.
At this point, I think between 60,000 and 100,000 Ukrainians have died. I think the overall casualty numbers are around 1.2 million. And I think it's 100,000 to 200,000 Russian soldiers are believed to have died. There's no indication that that's going to cease by appeasing Trump or Putin in the short term.
You mentioned President Trump as a deal maker. That's how you started off talking. Will we see a trilateral meeting? Do you think this will happen?
I have no idea. I mean, I think as well as I do at this point. I think, I think there's a myth around Trump, the deal maker. His business history is littered with bankruptcies and broken deals. He's an impatient man. He's very visceral, and he loves being in the spotlight. And those are three factors that actually can undermine effective deal making. The best deal makers are people who have long-term plans, stick to their guns, and seek constructive outcomes where both sides can win. That's not often been where he's resided.
30 seconds. What do you think his objectives are here with today and then future meetings with Ukraine? What do you think his focus is, objectives are?
I think he would like the war to end because he promised when he got elected that he would end it in a matter of days, and he hasn't. And so I think there's this, his ego is closely involved. We have to ask whether his own business interests are involved, as they've been in so many policies he's pursued. That's a question hanging over all of this. And then I think lastly, I just don't think he has enough of a stake in a long-term solution here to pursue short-term goals that are commensurate with that.
All right, it will be a historic time at the White House this afternoon in any case. Tim O'Brien, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Tim O'Brien is the Senior Executive Editor for Bloomberg Opinion. For our listeners in the US, a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals to help you to urinate those out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. Make sure you stay away from processed foods and clean your environment in your home so you're not exposed to harmful chemicals. Take zeolite every day. Now, if you want a heavier detox, take 10 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, do that every day till the bottle is done. Do that once or twice a year. I recommend that you do 3 drops a day, drink the water, drink the filtered water, and do that every day throughout the whole year. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Another stack that's super important, that's the third pillar of my core protocol, is the following. Turmeric. Turmeric will bring down inflammation, bring down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. Turmeric is also an antioxidant. Stacks really well with C60. Lignans, antioxidant. It's going to soak up those free radicals, help with your endocrine system and your immune system. Lignans also helps you recover after a workout. And ashwagandha root helps to control cortisol levels and blood glucose levels. So when you take these together, you're bringing down inflammation, which is very important for your vascular system, and you're bringing down inflammation that's going to help your immune system. Now, by bringing down systemic inflammation, you're also helping with your brain health, you're helping with your joint health, and you're going to recover quicker during a workout. So get the turmeric, the lignans, and the ashwagandha, very powerful stack to help with your cardiovascular health and your immune system. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Let's listen in on to live now. It looks like EU leaders are arriving at the White House.
Let's just wait on this, after which we have some additional news that we can get to as we continue to take a live look outside the White House, as we are expecting European Union leaders to arrive ahead of the meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Just please listen to the Wrangler, Isaac.
Your head's in the way.
Who's that? Iron Head. Is this the way? If I go here,
All right, so they're not there yet. Let's see. Let's take a look at some other news. Well, let's listen to Bondi about DC.
Introducing our cutting-edge Smart Zoom reading glasses, co-developed by NASA engineers. No eye exam needed. These glasses automatically adjust to your vision need.
Well, Zelensky is already in Washington, D.C.,
And that city is a lot safer now that Donald Trump has brought in the National Guard. And now there are 3 new states that have said, we will help. You have Virginia sending in 400 troops. South Carolina decided to send in 200 of their National Guard. And Ohio, 150, just to restore law and order and help Donald Trump with this crackdown on crime.
So this is what our Attorney General Pam Bondi is saying about what's happening in D.C. Over 300 arrests in D.C. and counting. Just last night, our federal and D.C. law enforcement partners made 68 arrests and seized 15 illegal firearms. Homicide suspects, drug traffickers, and more are being charged. I'll continue to stand with you as we make D.C. safe again. And I just think that the growing consensus is that the people that are in the media and some of the leftists, Democrats, or whatever you want to call them, are just on the wrong side of this issue. More of the locals are speaking out, especially with the elderly, that are saying, we've been asking for help for years. And again, a 90-10 issue, Democrats, the media are finding themselves on the wrong side of it.
And you see Jeanine Pirro over the weekend, Terry Cheryl, and she said, no one's talking about the black communities.
Right.
How many unsolved, no one's even pursuing answers to these crimes. And he goes, teen victims, teen assailants.
We actually have that soundbite. Listen to this. Okay.
The dumbest thing the Democrats ever said was defund the police. Okay? And we are suffering as a result of that Democrat statement because they know how dangerous crime is. I had them look at a stat that apparently no one's looked at. 45 teenagers killed in the last year in 8 months by weapons, by shotguns, by firearms, okay? 45. Every one of them African American, every one of them black. No one is talking about the minority community. No one is talking about the fact that 70% of those homicides are not solved. That means the guns are still on the street, the young thugs are still on the street, and they want to say, we can't prosecute young kids. Yes, you can. A murder is no less a murder if you're 15 years old.
She'd be really good on television if she ever wanted to do that for a living. But that's why I think she's a great spokesperson for it.
I don't understand why you wouldn't want more law enforcement in your neighborhood if it's not safe.
I also think it's not just law enforcement, it's the political leadership as well. And I think at some point, much like the president did with us in the Bronx, went into the barbershop, where the Bronx has been abandoned, just abandoned by politicians.
Do you think the president should go?
The president should go there. He should go to the blocks, walk with his law enforcement. Say, I got you. I got you. You have been. Many of the things that have been underreported is when the president says the forgotten men and women, he's talking about those communities as well. You've been calling for this. I'm here to save the day.
Well, no matter what he does, the Democrats hate it. Yeah. Listen to this. This was over the weekend. Saying this crackdown. I did. No, we have a great team that does it a lot better than I ever could. But they are saying this is a distraction. Listen to this.
All of this is a total abuse of power. It's a manufactured emergency.
What's happening here in Washington, D.C. is just a stunt. Donald Trump didn't like the fact that the walls were closing in on him, and so true to form, he just decided to create a new news cycle.
This is nothing but a big dog and pony show to make people look like everything is so bad in these big black cities.
Plain and simple. Donald Trump wants to distract.
I mean, when you're top.
I don't know about Washington, D.C. because I haven't been to Washington, D.C. since, I don't know, like maybe 2012, 2013, something like that. So it's been many years. So I don't know. I mean, Union Station seemed to be okay back then, but I do know about New York. There's a lot of crime, and a lot of the crime is done by blacks. That's just a fact.
Most dangerous city in the nation. I mean, you don't have the president doesn't have to manufacture it. The numbers don't. Even with the alleged fudging of the numbers, it's still top 3. So I mean, he doesn't have to do much here.
Well, I saw Maggie Haberman last week and some other Democratic, reporters who write for Democratic-leaning organizations say Democrats should be careful here. They're getting boxed into being pro-criminal. Yeah. And everybody in D.C. knows that they feel the danger. So that was just that said.
They focus on the wrong things. I love that they're saying this is a distraction. The president was just meeting with Vladimir Putin. He can chew gum and walk at the same time. He can take care of DC, right? But he can take care of DC and do other things at the same time. Big things. Meeting with Zelensky today at 1 o'clock. So we're going to be covering that.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gels. I have them in 2 different types. One is in a quick dispenser, and the other is in a tube form. Get the gel. It's a dual-purpose product. You can use it as a daily skincare. You can use it as an aftershave. You can use it to help heal a wound quicker. In addition, if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. So it's a great way to protect yourself. Now, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the gels, very high quality, dual purpose. Again, you can use it as daily skincare. And by doing this, you're prepared for anything that may be coming your way during the fall or winter season. Please go to my store, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. In addition, get the collagen. Collagen is dual purpose. Helps with your skin, helps with your nails and your hair, but it also will help with your musculature when you're doing resistance training. It'll help with your bones when you're doing resistance training. It'll help with your cartilage and your joint health. Super important. It's a powder. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even milk. And this stacks well with C60, resveratrol, vitamin C, and the gels. So I have a skincare box. It's the anti-aging skincare beginner's box that has the collagen, the vitamin C with magnesium, and the gel. Now the gel is for topical use daily. The vitamin C, you drink it with the filtered water, and the filtered water and the vitamin C will cross-link with the collagen, right? And that will allow you to have a better dermal layer. The better basal layer can be obtained by taking C60 and resveratrol. Why? Resveratrol helps to express youthful genes. Resveratrol is an antioxidant and stacks really well with the C60 to soak up those free radicals. The basal layer is what generates the new cells. So you're improving the basal layer with the C60 and the resveratrol. You're improving your dermal layer with the vitamin C and the collagen. Drink about 32 to 64 ounces of filtered water throughout the day to get the cross-linking. And the topical part of your skin with the gel. So in the beginner's box, you get the collagen, the gel, and the vitamin C. The advanced box, you get everything in the beginner's box plus the C60 and resveratrol. So collagen stacks really well with some of the items that I just mentioned. Now you can mix and match or just take the collagen. It's up to you. But there is a way to improve your skin, either buying the anti-aging beginner's box or the advanced box. And I told you why it works. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Everyone seeks dignified peace and true security. And at this very moment, the Russians are attacking a number of regions, destroying residential buildings and our civilian infrastructure. Russians are deliberately killing people, particularly children. As of now, 7 people have been killed as a result of the drone strike in a certain region, the youngest being a girl who is only a year and a half old, and dozens have been injured, including children. Meanwhile, in another region, missile strikes injured 20 people and killed 3. My condolences go out to all the victims' families and their loved ones. So that's the very latest response from Ukrainian President Zelensky in regards to a Russian strike that happened. Another live look right here outside of the White House. We have not seen any movement, but we are expecting the European Union leaders to arrive momentarily. And of course, we will bring that to you right here on Live Now from Fox.
Alrighty, so we're still waiting. Oh no, they're pulling in right now. Looks like they're pulling in.
We're expecting about half a dozen of them to be here later today. But Jordan, I also want to talk about the U.S. side of things. What do we know about the president's own negotiating team? Talking about Steve Witkoff, who has really taken a role in these negotiations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What do we know about how the White House has calculated its side of these negotiations?
Certainly. I mean, Steve Witkoff has played a big role. He, doesn't have a lot of foreign policy experience. A lot of the proposals he floats on television are, he presents them as novel and extraordinary when in fact they're not, and it kind of betrays his lack of experience on the world stage. The problem is he's a personal friend of Donald Trump, and so I think that's been a challenge for the Europeans, is that you have someone talking to Vladimir Putin who doesn't necessarily know the history of this conflict. We're talking about something like security guarantees. That was something that was offered to Ukraine in 1994 that Russia then violated when they invaded Crimea. And so for the Ukrainians, they've been working through Keith Kellogg, his Ukraine envoy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is someone who has a little more experience, but doesn't appear to have as much influence as Steve Witkoff.
Jordan, when it comes to this question of security guarantees that you just mentioned, is it possible that the U.S. and Russia could be on the same page when it talks about them? This is what we seem to have heard from Steve Witkoff over the weekend, and yet his version of security guarantee sounds an awful lot like Article 5. How is that something that the Russian government would accept?
Yeah, that's something they'll have to work out. But, Mike, you'll remember that, 1994, when they did the Budapest Memorandum, Russia signed that. And that said, Ukraine will give up its nuclear weapons, and in exchange, the signers of that pact, which included Russia, will not use military or economic coercion against Ukraine and take its territory. And Russia did just that. And so I'm sure that Vladimir Putin told someone like Steve Witkoff, who might not know that history, hey, yeah, we're on board for security guarantees. We've been on board for security guarantees. And he says, that sounds great. So they might be on the same page, but then putting it into practice in a way that is going to gain the trust of not only Ukraine, but the European leaders is something that's going to be very difficult to achieve.
And as we're talking, more leaders arriving at the White House. We just saw the EU's Ursula von der Leyen get out of a car, shake officials' hands, and walk into the White House. They are on the South Portico. There are so many of them coming. Normally, we see them enter through the White House North Lawn, but today, because there was such a large gathering, it seems that they have opted for the south side of the White House. But Jordan, I want to build on this idea of security guarantees, because for such a long time, right, we really heard the White House say that security guarantees were going to be implicit, that they were going to be because the U.S. had this vested economic interest in Ukraine. They signed that economic cooperation agreement earlier on, but now it seems like the White House might be willing to put something a little bit firmer on the table.
Yeah, there's some sort of mechanism militarily that's been discussed, but it's very vague at this point. And I think with the economic incentive too, one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is they don't know actually how many rare earths or what kind of rare earths are there. And so while that is, they might have the right of first refusal over them, if it's not a big stockpile, what incentive is there for the U.S. to say, yeah, we absolutely need this territory to satisfy our needs on that front?
Jordan, what would the U.S. role be when it comes to ensuring that these security guarantees actually work and have some teeth? Will there be a U.S. role? We also detected a shift in that position.
Certainly, yeah. They've talked about some sort of arrangement where U.S. troops aren't necessarily on the ground. There would be European troops stationed there with some sort of U.S. advisory role. But how that plays out remains to be seen. And also, you've seen this before, conflicts dating back to Vietnam, where the U.S. is in an advisory role, and all of a sudden they get pulled into conflicts. And I think Donald Trump and many of his supporters are wary of that. They know that, and that they could see how that could devolve into a situation that would violate his campaign promise not to get the U.S. involved again in foreign conflicts.
Well, let's build on this because, right, his vice president, J.D. Vance, was one of the staunchest opponents of additional aid to Ukraine. Last year in April, when we saw that additional aid package held up, that was ultimately a campaign that was led then by then Senator J.D. Vance. How do we know the different, how have we seen perhaps the administration defend against this idea? Because J.D. Vance has come out in support, obviously, of how these negotiations are going.
Certainly. I mean, I think for all the people under Donald Trump, they tend to just follow which way the wind is blowing when it comes to Donald Trump. So for J.D. Vance, someone who wants to be president perhaps in 2028, he's not going to do anything to get really publicly crosswise with Donald Trump. Maybe if he doesn't believe, in his heart of hearts that Ukraine should receive additional U.S. military aid, I doubt that he's going to do something to publicly break with the president in this kind of format.
And he also has something else at stake, his own presidential ambition. So how carefully is he treading in these moments now?
Yeah, it's a tough balance for him because he knows, or at least he thinks, that the Trump base doesn't want, again, additional U.S. involvement, perhaps U.S. aid to Ukraine. And so he signaled that he's on that page. But again, you don't want to have this break with Donald Trump because we saw what Donald Trump did with Mike Pence, his last vice president. He basically quashed any question of his political future on January 6th, and any other administration officials who've gotten crosswise with him, he's hit them over the head. And so J.D. Vance certainly knows that.
Jordan, Fabian, thank you so much. Thank you for joining Balance of Power today. And we have more leaders arriving here, Tyler.
Right, exactly. We just saw the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer enter the White House. We were talking about relatively warm relationships before. Of course, the United Kingdom was the first to ink a trade deal. And Mike, I was reading one of our analysis from our analysts at Bloomberg Economics, and I found it so interesting because they said that, of course, these European leaders want to play a central role in this. They had wanted to be at the table in Alaska last week, but actually this is considered to be a relatively positive sign for them because at least now the administration is discussing with them this idea of how they're going to move forward in Ukraine instead of the more unilateral approach that we had saw when the Trump administration first began and reached out to Russia. We saw those meetings in Saudi Arabia earlier this year where Ukrainians and the Europeans were not conferenced in at all.
And it's interesting in the sense that the president has tried to enlist more of the counterparts that he has gotten to know better since taking office this second time around. And that includes, of course, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but also familiar faces to him like Giorgia Meloni and, of course, Emmanuel Macron. We're joined now by Melinda Herring, who's Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and an authority on Ukraine and Europe. And we want to thank you for joining us today to talk about what could be a very consequential moment for not only Donald Trump and his foreign policy ambitions, but of course for Europe and Ukraine. The president is moving very fast with this. What is the risk in terms of the process in crafting an agreement that will really hold and ensure Ukraine's integrity and security?
Thanks for having me here. So I would say don't put any champagne on ice today, okay? Everyone's here, everyone's excited, everyone wants the war to be over. But this is not going to hold unless Ukraine and its security aspirations are part of the picture. And right now, there's no real lasting security guarantee. Yesterday, we saw Steve Witkoff kind of writing something on the back of a napkin on the Sunday shows. That's not going to hold water. So this is a very complicated problem, but it's also a domestic problem, Mike. So Zelensky's going to have to sell this to his people. He's going to have to convince millions of Ukrainians to stand down. And right now, what's been offered is certainly not good enough.
Now, on the question of the security guarantees, is there a version of this that really would be acceptable to both Ukraine?
We're going to go to Sky News. They're talking about why Putin wants the Donbass region. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is super important to help with the health of your mitochondria. The first 4 B vitamins will work with the electron transport chain within your mitochondria to produce more ATP. Vitamin B complex helps with cellular metabolism, and vitamin B complex will help to protect your neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take the vitamin B complex, protect those neurons, and rev up that metabolism. Super important if you're 40 years of age. Omega-3, important, it brings down inflammation and it helps with your lipid profile. It'll help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you improve your lipid profile, you're reducing the chances of cardiovascular problems. Now, olive leaf, or the omega-3 stacks well with olive leaf extract, but omega-3 will stack well with vitamin B complex. Why? By stacking the vitamin B complex, you're revving up that metabolism, your cellular metabolism. You're protecting your neurons. And the omega-3 is helping with your cardiovascular health. When you have better cardiovascular health, you're creating a microenvironment because of better blood flow to your brain. A lot of people don't realize when you start clogging up your carotid, you have poor brain flow. Now, microscopically, if you have poor brain flow in some of these small capillaries and small vascular systems within your brain, you're not giving the nutrients you need for your neurons. So you want good blood flow. Now you get good blood flow by doing cardio, eating properly, making sure you're drinking filtered water, stay away from processed foods, control your blood glucose levels, but also taking supplements that will help with the cardiovascular health. So you want to bring down those LDL levels. You want to bring down inflammation. You want to bring down those free radicals at the vascular level so you're not building further plaque. You want to get that blockage in your carotid to be shrunk down. You know, let's say you have 60% blockage or 50% blockage. You want to go to 10% or 15% to get better blood flow. But not just that. When you have at the vascular level, small vascular systems, small blood vessels, and there's inflammation, you're not getting proper blood flow. And so you'll slowly starve off your neurons. You don't want to do that. So doing good cardio, exercise throughout the week, eating properly, getting a proper sleep, taking the proper supplementation is going to help with your neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the omega-3, and get the vitamin B complex. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
Today on the Sky News Daily with me, Tamara Cohen, Russia has been fighting for control of Ukraine's Donbass region for years. So why does Vladimir Putin want it so badly? Putin is demanding that Ukraine surrender the Donbass as the price for peace. This industrial region bordering Russia in Ukraine's southeast has been partially occupied since 2014 and has seen some of the most intense fighting of the conflict. Strategically important and heavily fortified, it's basically holding the front line. We'll hear from our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn, who's in Kyiv, in a bit about how Ukrainians feel about the prospect of losing the Donbass. But first, let's speak to our security and defence analyst Michael Clark about why this region is at the heart of a possible deal. Michael, tell us a bit about the Donbass region. it has just under 1 million people. So it's not huge in terms of territory, but why is it so important for the Ukrainians, and why does Vladimir Putin want it so much?
The importance of the Donbass as a region is that it's industrial. It has a lot of coal mines in it. It was the heart of Ukraine's defense manufacturing sector during the old Soviet years. There is still quite a lot of manufacturing in the Donbass. These are sort of heavy industrial towns and cities by and large. And not least, there's quite a lot of minerals there. So there are quite big deposits of lithium, titanium, non-ferrous metals, and there's a big belt of rare earth minerals. And of course, you know that everyone's talking about rare earths these days. A big belt of rare earth minerals that runs sort of north-south, right along the border between Donetsk and the next oblast, Dnipropetrovsk. And that's an area which at present is under Ukrainian control. And if they gave up the area that Putin demands, that would then, those rare earths would be under Russian control.
It's quite important to say that there has been fighting going on in Donbass way beyond the last 3 years. If we go back to 2014, when the Russians invaded Crimea, pretty soon after that, fighting began in the Donbass region. Tell us a bit about what happened then.
The Russians stimulated pro-Russian militias to declare independence. They wanted to grab the Luhansk and the Donetsk as sort of separate entities, which of course then would unite with Russia at some point. It was all engineered from the Kremlin. But the symbolic importance was also that Slavyansk, which is the northernmost city in the area we're talking about, the area that the Ukrainians still control, was the first to be grabbed by these militias. And it became the symbol of this attempt to split the Donbass off in favor of Russia. Now, the Ukrainians then liberated Slavyansk, and they've held on to it ever since. They've been fighting to retain this territory since 2014. I mean, at the beginning of this round of the war, 2022, when the full-scale invasion was launched, the pro-Russian militias held about 30% of the Donbass, about 30% of Luhansk, about 30% of Donetsk. And now they've got, almost all of Luhansk and about 70% of Donetsk. So they've actually increased their holding there since 2022. But what they haven't got is this string of fortifications which go from Slavyansk in the north right down to Kostiantynivka in the south. There's a string of cities that are powerfully defended, and all the settlements in between them are well defended. So it's like a belt of fortifications, which the Ukrainians have successfully defended at great cost in lives and money for 11 years now.
And it has been one of the most...
Listen, paying $14.99 a month for a streaming app, and $9.99 a month for a music app, and $12.99 for a fitness app, and more money.
And it has been one of the most deadly front lines in the war, hasn't it?
Trench lines, frozen lines of defence from 2014 onwards. And those trench lines became fairly well established, and they didn't change all that much. There'd be occasional movement on one side or the other, or attacks on one side or the other, very like the First World War. But what's happened since 2022 is that the cities themselves have now been bombarded. I mean, before 2022, the Russians weren't close enough with their artillery to actually bombard the cities. I mean, artillery ranges are about 15 to 18 miles. So as long as the forces are further away than that, then they can't bombard the city. But I mean, since 2022, first of all, they've got their artillery closer. Secondly, they've used aircraft. Now that they're officially we're completely at war with Ukraine, they've used aircraft and they've used drones to bombard the cities. A very big attack on the railway station in Kramatorsk, just a few months after the start of the war, which killed many civilians. And when you talk about the total losses, the Russians have now lost over 1 million, which is that's dead and seriously wounded. I mean, so seriously wounded they can't go back to the front. The Ukrainians seem to have lost about 400,000. So this conflict has already cost about 1.5 million lives, and probably 50% of those losses are effectively in the area that we're talking about.
The Ukrainians obviously feel that they fought very hard for this region. It'd be very difficult to give it up. The Russians have, over the last few weeks, been really pushing their offensive there, haven't they?
I mean, the Russians, in anticipation of what's been going on in Alaska, have had a really big push to try to grab as much territory as possible. And we now know, as a result of the last 24 hours, what's been leaking out of Alaska, as it were, of those meetings there. But Putin was saying to Trump, apparently, look, I've almost taken the Donbass. Let's agree that you give it to me, or that the Ukrainians will give it to me. Now, the Ukrainians are very clear that, no, you haven't taken the whole of the Donbass, and you can't. This big offensive last week at east of DrPaulCottrell was a failure. I mean, the Russians did push about 20 kilometers north, but they only pushed in small groups. They were not particularly well supported. The Ukrainians moved in their the 33rd Brigade, and at least two of the brigades of their new Azov Corps, and they've snuffed them out. And I think they've killed a lot of the Russians who were there. The others who were not dead have been taken prisoner. So the Ukrainians have stabilized their position in that part of the front. And it isn't the case that the Russians are just going to roll up the rest of the Donbass. If they could, they would have done that a long time ago. They are geographically, if you look at it on the map tomorrow, on a map, they're not many miles away from the big cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. But that's a flat map. If you look on a relief map, you'll see how difficult the terrain is to attack. And if you put on a relief map all of the fortifications, you'll see that these fortresses will take some taking. And so, although the Russians are actually close to these areas, they've spent 2 years and not got closer than they are now.
So this is basically a very cynical demand from Putin.
What Vladimir Putin wants is the whole of Ukraine. And I think there's a fair idea that he wants to put forward a demand that the Ukrainians are bound to reject, which is that he has to have the whole of the Donbass. Because when the Ukrainians then reject it, I think the calculation is the Americans will then blame Zelensky for the lack of progress and pull the plug on military aid altogether. And so by demanding the Donbass, this may be a ploy by Putin to get the Americans out of the war completely, and then the Russians will feel that they've got a much easier job in achieving their full objective, which is to take the rest of Ukraine.
Just finally, what are the options now, and are they all dependent on what Donald Trump wants?
The big question is America prepared still to help Ukraine, at least with intelligence support and support through the Starlink program, which is really important to their day-to-day military operations? Elon Musk's Starlink. I mean, they have about 50,000 terminals, which are paid for by the Polish government, incidentally. But those terminals are really important to the way Ukraine conducts the war. So do the Americans let them carry on fighting with a little bit of help? Or do the Americans say, well, it's your fault the war's continuing, you should have surrendered when you had the chance, we're going to pull the plug on it all? And then, if that's the case, then we'll find out how brave the Europeans are. Are they prepared to keep Ukraine going? Is Ukraine prepared to keep fighting? And at the risk of a real transatlantic split between the Europeans and the United States, are we prepared to keep on supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes, as our politicians keep saying? Well, I guess we'll find out.
Thanks, Michael. Let's speak now to Dominic Waghorn, our international affairs editor, who's in Kyiv. Dominic, how have people been reacting to what's happened in Alaska over the weekend?
People are really worried. They are very frustrated. They are deeply concerned about the future, and they were sickened by what they saw from Alaska over the weekend. To see Vladimir Putin courted and welcomed so enthusiastically by Donald Trump really sickened them to the back teeth, and they're very worried about where this is going to go next. In the words of one woman who we spoke to on the streets of Kyiv, she said it was a disaster, and for her it was like Munich 1938.
It's a diplomatic failure in the first place, and it shows that Trump inviting and greeting Putin that way just shows that he legitimizes the war crimes, he legitimizes the kidnappings of children. It's just like 1938 when Chamberlain basically sold off Czechoslovakia, and this is basically what's happening now.
And they're saying it's not just them that should be worried, it should be the whole of it.
It's interesting, the similarities between the early part of the 19th century and now. Please go to my store, the-studio-Reykjavik, 1900s, I meant. Please go to my store, the-studio-Reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will help to get rid of that brain fog. You'll be able to concentrate on work or in school or even tasks at home. Really important to take every day, no matter what your age is. And what it'll do is it'll help to support the memory, get rid of that brain fog, and you're going to be able to concentrate. When you take it on a regular basis and you drink it with filtered water, what's going to happen is that you're going to get this positive neuroplasticity. Your memory's going to improve. You're going to be able to think faster, and you're going to be able to have better neural connections. And that way, by taking clarity factor, you're slowing down the aging process because you're improving those dendritic connections. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. Super important. Now, take Myotrol. Myotrol is very important to take after you turn age 40. Why? Because when you get older, your gene expression starts to change. You start to methylate genes, so the gene expression is harder for certain genes. Sometimes some genes just turn off through that methylation process. And what you want to do is take supplements like Myotrol. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression for building muscle and to maintaining muscle. When you get older, you start to atrophy. So you need to do resistance training, build muscle, and take Myotrol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from Myotrol. It stacks really well with Gladiator Barley and Boomer Boost to build that muscle, but make sure you do resistance training. Resveratrol is something that I've been taking for decades. Now, it stacks really well with C60, NAD+, ubiquinol, clarity factor. Resveratrol is an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to help with the health of the mitochondria. Your energies will boost up. And resveratrol helps to get rid of senescent cells, and it helps with youthful gene expression. This is the reason why resveratrol should be part of your anti-aging protocol. So a good stack here to help with neural health, clarity factor. Myotrol to help with your musculature, and resveratrol to help with youthful gene expression. Stack these together to get the max benefit. Now, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
That we should be worried by the direction Donald Trump is taking.
What would this mean for Ukrainians, the idea that Russia could have the Donbass region?
Well, it would mean surrender as far as they're concerned. It's giving land to the Russians, and the crucial distinction between this plan and the one that Steve Witkoff discussed with the Russians back in April. Steve Witkoff, of course, Donald Trump's confidant, former golfing buddy, real estate lawyer turned rookie negotiator. Back in April, he was discussing the possibility of the front line being frozen, the Russians getting all the land that they had taken to the east, and the Ukrainians keeping the land on the west. Now, that would be a bitter pill for the Ukrainians to swallow, but what is now being proposed is land being handed to the Russians that they haven't even taken yet. And this is really crucial, strategically important, symbolic land as well. We spoke to one soldier who'd just come back from there over the weekend, spoke to him yesterday, and he described, what is a very nasty, difficult war being fought there now, mainly by drones, with soldiers fighting on both sides, avoiding attacks from drones, a kind of sci-fi, apocalyptic scenario he was depicting for us. And he said he's lost friends who've died in the battle. He's been fighting in the Donbass since 2015. He'd seen, I think he said, 60 soldiers in his unit killed when the terminal of the airport in Donetsk was attacked. So for him, this is very, very personal. And the sacrifices he and his colleagues and comrades have made cannot just come to nothing if this land is handed over to the Russians that never held it before. And for Zelensky, it would be political suicide to agree to this, but also strategic, because these fortress cities are so important. They would open up a whole chunk of territory for the Russians to then try and attack again, should Putin want to come back for more, if a peace deal is done in a few years' time.
The Ukrainian people who've been living under occupation in the Donbass for several years have obviously suffered a lot, and the prospect of handing that land over to their enemies must be particularly difficult for them to swallow.
Ukrainians say to us, this idea of, talk about land swaps or handing over land. Don't forget, land has people on it. It's not just land, obviously. And on the land that Putin has taken, he has done terrible things to the Ukrainians there. Any member of the former Ukrainian government disappears into detention, is tortured, as are the colleagues who have documented in Kherson and other parts of Ukraine. And the work we've done has been looking at Ukrainian orphans and children who are taken into Russia. They're either adopted by Russian families, or they're put into institutions where many of them are indoctrinated and brainwashed by the Putin regime, and many of them are then put into, if they're old enough, put into fighting service to fight against their own country. And of course, it's Putin's involvement in that large-scale mass deportation and abduction of children that has earned him the indictment at the ICC. So he's an indicted alleged war criminal because of his involvement in that. Another reason why it really stuck in the core of Ukrainians to see this alleged war criminal being fated in Alaska.
If the Ukrainians even wanted to give away any territory, this isn't something that you can just achieve by signing on a dotted line, is it? Ukraine is a sovereign country. It's been independent from the Soviet Union since 1991, and it has a constitution. To give away any territory or swap any land, as Donald Trump puts it, what would they need to do?
It would be unconstitutional for Zelensky to give up land in perpetuity. He's not going to do that. What they've been trying to be persuaded to do by people like Mark Rutte, who got a lot of flack for it, the Secretary General of NATO, is to agree to de facto cession of the land. So to accept that the land that the Russians have taken by force remains in Russian hands for now. That's very different to de jure cession, the Latin for by law, which is actually handing over land and accepting it's been annexed by the Russians. So it's impossible for Zelensky to do that politically. Although Donald Trump has sounded very impatient about that. When asked about that, he said, well, nothing in the Ukrainian constitution stopped Zelensky getting into this war and killing thousands of people, which was a grotesque and perverse misrepresentation of history, of course. But that seems to be where Donald Trump is coming at this from. He doesn't believe there are any sort of constitutional impediments to Zelensky giving up the land. And that's the big challenge, I think, for Zelensky in the Oval Office, is dealing with somebody who doesn't really understand some of the fundamental truths at the heart of this conflict.
Isn't there a war weariness, though, in Ukraine? People feeling like they don't want this to carry on indefinitely. They don't want their sort of teenage sons to be fighting in the war in years to come.
Yeah, you're right. There is a growing sense, I think, amongst Ukrainians that this war is going to go on and on and on, and they're currently losing it because the Russians are finally getting their act together on the front and coming up with tactics that are working quite well for them. And there is, as you say, a real war weariness out there. You talk to Ukrainians, and they're actually more willing to entertain the idea of the land that the Russians have taken being kept by the Russians for now, at least, if they can be certain that peace will follow. But I think there are two caveats to that. One is that the land that is given to the Russians for now is always going to remain Ukrainian in their minds, and will have to be taken back at some point by force or diplomatically. But the other caveat is that they will only agree to this if there are security guarantees, which we hear a lot about. And what that means really is Ukrainians need to know if they do agree to a deal where land is given up, the Russians can't come back for more in a few years' time. And what they'll say is that it's not just their future, it's also the whole of Europe's, because if Putin's encouraged by this, if force prevails, if might is proven right by this, he does succeed in his acts of aggression, he will be tempted to do so again, possibly with other European nations and the Baltics, and therefore he needs to be given a really clear sense that he can't come back for more, that NATO will have to give it the kind of guarantees and protection in the future that will deter him from doing so in the future.
Thanks for listening to today's Sky News Daily.
Please go to my store, bud-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. Nattokinase is fibrinolytic, and it's going to help with your lipid profile. Super important to help with your cardiovascular health. Take nattokinase every day. Vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 helps to absorb calcium. It's also a great gene expression cofactor. D3 also helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis. You can take higher doses of D3 with K2, taking calcium and doing resistance training, and taking turmeric, and guess what? You can reverse the effects of osteoarthritis. But vitamin K2 stacks well with D3 to absorb calcium. Do resistance training, it's going to help to build bone density because it's helping to remodel that bone matrix. Also, D3 and K2 will help to pull some of that calcium depositing around plaque and reduce further calcium depositing. There's a cardiovascular box that I have, a longevity cardiovascular box that you can take a look at. A great way to get healthy with your cardiovascular system. You do some cardio, you take the supplementation, you control your blood glucose levels, and over time you're going to notice within a year that you have reduced the blockage. So you take your baseline with an ultrasound or calcium screening, and then wait a year and do the same thing, and you'll notice that you have better results. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin K2 and get the vitamin D3, stack them together. You can also stack the nattokinase to really supercharge that cardiovascular stack. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Joining us today is Moody's Analytics Chief Economist Mark Zandi. Mark, it's great to have you back. Good morning.
Good morning.
Goldman writes a note today, says that some of these revisions are likely to start triggering some rule recession fears. Are you anywhere near that camp?
Yeah, I think recession risks are really high. I think the key here is jobs. I think that's where it's supposed to focus. And of course, with the recent data, we see job growth has come to a virtual standstill. And I don't see any reason why we'll see a pickup here anytime soon. So, if we start getting some negative job numbers, which I think are really very, very possible, that would be a clear indication of recession. The SOMS rule is around the unemployment rate, Carl. If it increases more than about a half a point on a 3-month moving average, that historically has signaled recession. Interestingly, that may not be quite as telling this go around because unemployment may not be the indicator to watch because of the weak labor force, good immigration policy, and some other things. We may not see unemployment rise to the degree that we have historically, belying the weakness in the economy, but nonetheless. So the SOMS rule may actually not be the indicator to watch, but everything else strongly suggests that the economy is in trouble here.
Right. So 2 questions. Is a negative print part of your base case anytime in the next, by the end of the year? And where do you think break-evens are right now?
Yeah, I think break-even, so that's the rate of monthly job growth consistent with stable unemployment. That's probably around 25, 50K, somewhere in there, and that's kind of sort of where it feels like underlying job growth is now, abstracting from the vagaries of the data, measurement issues, that kind of thing. But the probability of a negative print and negative numbers is pretty high. I think it's going to be difficult not to see some negative numbers here. And historically, it's a negative payroll employment. That is when the National Bureau of Economic Research, the folks that date business cycles, date recessions. Once that we go negative, that month that employment goes negative, that's the month when recession begins. Now, of course, you have to see a string of negative numbers. I mean, the recession is a persistent decline in economic activity. So it's not just 1 or 2 months, which seems very likely. We'll need something more than that to get a recession. But that number is going to be key to deciding when recession begins here in the next few months.
Can you explain, just technically speaking, how some of the immigration policy may be masking some of the underlying employment weaknesses that you're seeing? What numbers are you looking at to indicate that, and kind of how do you see that filtering through to things like consumer spending and overall economic growth or recession?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, immigrants have been key to the growth of the labor force. I mean, if you go back a year ago, before the more stringent immigration policy went into effect, we were seeing a foreign-born labor force growing 4 or 5%, very strong. Now it's actually declining. This stringent immigration policy started to kick in a year ago with Biden's executive order on asylum seekers, and of course President Trump has reinforced those policies. And so labor force growth has for the foreign-born has actually started to decline, and the result of that is overall labor force has gone flat. So the size of the labor force today is actually lower than it was at the start of the year. And so because of that, that's keeping the unemployment rate, down. So you can't really look at the unemployment rate as a gauge of the strength of the economy. It's really about jobs and job growth slowing. So, and by the way, this is really important to longer term growth. Obviously, the potential growth rate of the economy, how fast can the economy grow without generating inflationary pressures, is critically dependent on the growth in the labor force. If the labor force isn't growing, then the economy's potential is a lot slower. We're not going to be able to, maintain growth rates that are very strong for very long without generating inflationary pressure. So this is very important. The other thing about immigration that's really key here is that it's about demand. One one other indication of the economy's weakness is consumer spending all in. Real consumer spending in aggregate has gone nowhere this year, and that may be in part because of the immigrants deporting or pulling back on their spending given the situation that they're in, and that's weighing on consumer spending broadly.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost helps with multiple organ systems. It'll help with your cardiovascular system, your brain function, your musculature, your energy levels and your metabolism. It'll help to control your A1C levels. It has a very comprehensive nutritional compound profile. Read the label on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. But take it every day. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods or filtered water, milk, or even a smoothie. Take it every day. If you want to lose weight, use this for breakfast or for lunch and have some calorie restriction. All right. And you'll lose weight safely. You'll have energy throughout the whole day, so you don't have to worry about, oh, you don't have enough energy. Bullshit. You'll have tons of energy. And what this will do is it'll allow you to safely lose weight and to get healthy and to build musculature. So you want to do some cardio, you want to do resistance training, you want to be eating protein. And when you do that, you're going to be able to lose weight safely. Now, for ones that are already at their target weight, they have a good BMI, you'll benefit from Boomer Boost. You just maintain your calorie intake. Now, Boomer Boost will also help to bring down inflammation. You'll notice that you're slowing down the aging process. Your immune system will get better. Your endocrine system will get better. Now, you can stack it and you get added benefits with the barley. I have two types of barley. Now, you can take the barley separately or you can take it with the Boomer Boost. I take it with the Boomer Boost to get the max benefit. Now, the heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. It's a powder. It's a high-density protein. This is very high quality. So take it every day. Same way, soft foods, filtered water, milk, smoothie, however you want to take it. Now, Gladiator barley, which is the one I prefer to take, helps to build muscle. It stacks well with Myotrol, and it stacks really well with the Boomer Boost. Now, Gladiator barley, you'll get the benefits of the heirloom barley, detoxifying your body regularly, lowering the inflammation, soaking up free radicals, but it'll help you to build muscle. And that way you'll get the max benefit of controlling your A1C levels. Many people in the United States are pre-diabetic or diabetic. In most cases, it's because of being overweight and you become insulin resistant. If you start to give your body the nutrients it needs, and you start eating properly and losing weight, then what will happen is you're going to be able, and building muscle, you're going to be able to reverse the effects of the high glucose levels in your blood. You want to control those A1C levels, but it takes time. So do some resistance training, proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, and you can get healthy. Now, Gladiator barley and the heirloom barley helps to bring down inflammation. That's important for your immune system. That's important for your brain function. That's important for your cardiovascular health. That's important for your joint health, and you'll recover quicker after a workout. So please go to my store, get the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. You can take them separately, or you can take either one with the Boomer Boost. And when you do that, you're going to get the max benefits. Like I said, a great stack to build muscle and to improve your health is to take the Boomer Boost, the Gladiator barley, and the Myotrol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great supplements I offer. I've told you many ways on how to stack the supplements to be able to get the most benefit for the dollars that you are investing in your health. Go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. I have very high quality supplements that I take every day. Please go to my store, follow the protocol, and you're going to get healthy. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.